Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney in London, broadcasting the show for us today as we discuss the next steps in personal computing. I'm wearing Quest 3, and we're using David Heaney's UVR studios with hand tracking and meta avatars. I tried to wire myself into the Ethernet today and keep my Wi-Fi off, but I couldn't figure that out. So I'm on Wi-Fi. We've got a tablet in front of us that shows us live comments. So if you have any questions about VR, put it there. And either our community or ourselves will try to get to it. We will try to address your comments over the course of the show. So if we don't immediately respond to something you ask, we'll try to keep it in mind or come back to it. And you can listen to our podcast on any platform of your choice. And we encourage everyone to become a member of UploadVR.com to support our work directly. David, what do we have today?
Hello again, everyone. I'm feeling a little sick today with a minor headache, but it shouldn't be anything show-stopping, so hopefully I don't have to drop out. I'm pretty sure I can still keep going through the whole show. Today we're going to talk about, firstly, the leak from today that appears to be the first clear image of Quest 3S, Meta's next headset, and we'll talk all about what that next headset really is. We'll talk about HTC teasing a new Vive headset after Qualcomm earlier in the year said that HTC will use the XR2 Plus Gen 2 chipset. We will then talk about the Magic Leap layoffs that Ian reported on that have come really quite soon after the announcement of Magic Leap's partnership with Google. We'll then have three more sections. One will be about Meta Quest news. That includes the dynamic occlusion for mixed reality getting better, Meta AI coming to Quest headsets in the US and Canada next month, and then the Meta Avatars graphics overhaul that was essentially leaked because some Meta employees are internally testing it and it showed up on their Horizon profiles. We'll then have a short section about Apple Vision Pro, just a few little news topics for it. It got a new virtual environment, Lake Vrangla, so that's a really high quality immersive environment that it got. It got a Apple immersive video, a new series called Boundless, the first episode of it, hot air balloons. Not a huge amount to talk about there, but we will just note it. And finally, we will talk about my impressions of Somnium VR1, the high-end PC VR headset, the native DisplayPort PC VR headset that I tried last week that has impressive field of view, but an odd focus issue.
Yes, I want to encourage people to come to the VR Games Cast on Tuesdays to hear Don and I talk about all the latest games. We've got the schedule worked out pretty well. We're getting better into this rhythm. But Don and I come in on Tuesdays to discuss games, and then David and I are here on VR Download on Thursdays to discuss larger tech trends. I have to say that right now because the embargo just lifted on Wallace and Gromit's course for Walkabout Mini Golf, and you can go and find a 22-minute tour video for the entire course. Well, not the entire course. I left the 18th hole off of that tour video because it is a bit of a spoiler, and the Walkabout people wanted to be really protective of that spoiler. And I guess I could see if you're a Wallace and Gromit fan, you wouldn't want to see what that 18th hole is until you see it fresh for the first time in VR. But there are plenty of people out there that I think are going to be wowed by seeing Wallace and Gromit realized for the first time inside Walkabout Mini Golf, the way they've tried to adopt the art style of claymation into the actual course. You can go and see that in the tour video. Anyways, that just published this very minute. It's out on our socials, and it just coincided with our launch in here. But we're not gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about the Quest 3S image leaking. And I like that you said this is the first clear image, because it looks a little blurry to me, even though this is the first time we've officially seen it, right?
Well, the reason I said that it's the first clear image is that we actually have seen Quest 3S before in the background of a video posted by Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth. You can see here, we covered this before a few months ago. It is a shape that's distinctly different to Quest 3 and Quest 2. It's thicker than a Quest 3, but far less curved than a Quest 2. And Andrew Bosworth actually replied to someone pointing this out on social media by kind of teasingly saying, oh, the video quality on Threads is a bit too high. So that was essentially a confirmation there by any other name. So flash forward now 2 months to now, This is why I'm calling that a clear image, even though it's not, HD, it's not 1080p or 4K. It's very clear compared to this bundle of pixels that we had before. And so if anyone is in doubt now that Quest 3S is not imminent, or that the leak from the Meta market research study from March was not real, it seems like that doubt should be falling away at this point. So this image was posted on X by VR Panda, a VR headset accessory maker whose real forename is Alex. And I'm assuming that because Meta partners with certain accessory makers but to launch accessories on day one of their headset, that somebody in China, one of these companies, has a headset to test the accessories with, has shared a picture of it or a video of it with other people in China, and somebody has, leaked it to Alex, and now he's posted it on social media. So we get a very clear view of this headset. What you can notice is that this looks like the front of Oculus Go from 2018, but with added cameras. And Oculus Go was obviously Meta's cheapest headset ever. It was only $200 at launch, and it was designed to be as cheap as possible. And so you can see this design here is very, very clearly all about how do we deliver the experience of Quest 3 in a headset that is significantly cheaper. I imagine this thing is going to look cheap, feel cheap, but deliver that midpoint experience between Quest 2 and Quest 3 that Meta wants to deliver at a much cheaper price than Quest 3.
David and I were discussing, and he actually commented on this to me. I sort of alerted the team or talked to the team that now is about the right time for a Quest 3S to be found in a hotel hallway. That, of course, being, for those that aren't following, the Quest Pro was leaked through a hotel worker. Basically, a hotel worker was walking down, doing their rounds through a hotel, and found a bag in the hotel, took it to the office and opened it up and saw a Quest inside. And this was a Quest 2 owner, I think, at the time. So they were an actual VR gamer who had discovered the next generation VR headset. And we had in our comments, people suspected that the person himself was a plant, that it was a bogus leak. And it's difficult because, you can imagine as a lay viewer looking at this and seeing hype built for unreleased Meta products by any leak. And so I can understand all the people out there that imagine these leaks are purposeful. And to be fair, many leaks are purposeful. So we have to hold those both those ideas in our head at the same time. But not every leak is created equal, right? They all come out in different ways. And at the same time, I'm really glad to finally see this headset, right? It's been a long time coming to actually get here and see what this looks like.
Yeah, we've seen this design before in a render from that leaked slide back in March, and we've had the conversation before about how a lot of people at the time thought this was completely fake, that this was just somebody trying to pull a prank on everyone on Reddit. But it really looks now, as it has for weeks or months now, that this truly was a real render, a real leak. I take the view that far more of these leaks are just incompetence or accidents than people think. So many people have this idea that these companies are constructing this grand scheme of leaking it this way and leaking it that way. I don't think that's the case.
That's true. But David, we've got HTC coming up next, right? And we've got to talk about the way that they engineer coverage.
Right? Let's be 100% real here. If you want to build up hype for a new headset, you don't release this image. This isn't a flattering angle. This doesn't say anything good about the product. It confirms it exists. If anything, I think Meta would be frustrated by seeing these kind of leaks because they want to control the narrative in a very controlled way, right? They want to announce this thing alongside, the best possible renders, the price, the features, the games, all of that. I am very much so a skeptic of the popular internet narrative that all these leaks are concocted. I just don't think it's true. And I've heard from people inside these companies that it's just incompetence. Somebody just leaks it by accident.
Yeah. So very important device. And honestly, I saw this article pop up in my feed that was from the Washington Post, one of the, I guess at one time, one of the most respected respected news organizations in the world. I say at one time because I read this article and it was all about people ending up in emergency rooms for injuring themselves in VR for not seeing their physical environment around them, and then hitting it with their bodies in very, very painful ways. And the article included a paragraph with very, very wrong estimates of the size of the VR market. And that's extremely frustrating to hold that, to see that organization put those estimates of the size of the VR market into a publication that's considered the publication of record by many people, all before this, right? Like, this is going to change the world in ways that people can barely fathom right now. Do you agree with that, David?
Yeah, firstly, on that Washington Post thing, I think one of the things that gives us the most confidence in our job security is that the VR and AR coverage by mainstream media continues to be terrible. I'd expected that this would only be a thing for, the late 2010s. And I thought, sure, okay, they don't get it now, but surely they will have somebody on staff who understands this within a few years. It's still not the case, even amongst mainstream gaming media and mainstream technology media. The understanding of this market is pretty much woeful, and it's I'm surprising. I'm sure that as it gets bigger and that people get more familiar with it, that'll change, but not for now. But yeah, we had a commenter here from Tyler who said, "What headset is this?" And that kind of ties into what you're saying here, which is what exactly is this and what does it mean? Yeah, this is the headset that this is Meta Quest 3S, and we have a wide range of sources now that are painting the exact same picture of what this is. The idea here is that Quest 3 is great, but it's $500. And Quest 2 was very successful at $300 and now today at $200. So this headset is about bringing the experience of Quest 3 down to a cheaper price point. Roughly, we think around $300. So what this will supposedly do is keep the Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2 chipset, so that chipset that gives Quest 3 twice the GPU power of Quest 2, that's going to be in this thing, and color pass-through mixed reality with these sensors. So you get that same color pass-through mixed reality, you get those better graphics, higher resolution, higher frame rate in many games, but the way that they get that down in price to around 300 is they use the lenses and display from Quest 2. So it's the lenses and display system of Quest 2 with the chipset and mixed reality of Quest 3. And the product we believe is going to be called Quest 3S. And we've seen that name pop up on the Quest store. We've seen it in multiple leaks now. The only thing I would say is that one thing I think we were slightly wrong on here is that we expected that there was a good chance that this thing might have launched around May or June. And it looks now like at this stage, given we're now, 2 months away from Connect, it's very likely to me that they're going to just launch this thing at Connect, like they have with every headset since Quest 2. Quest 2, Quest Pro, Quest 3, they've all been launched at Connect, and it looks like Quest 3S is going to be the same.
Yeah, so a couple comments here I want to talk about here. Let's mention Mestora's question. Are any Quest 2 owners going to buy this, or is this for brand new people? We are on record. We have the URLs going back to last year recommending people don't buy the Quest 2 new because we saw enough indications that this Quest 3S was coming in the near future, specifically for that upgrade path, specifically for new people, and specifically for the upgrade path of Quest 2 going to get this Quest 3S, because there's plenty of people out there. This is the transitional time. I'm seeing it in our comments and in various places from people who are thinking about PSVR 2. How do I make the transition from like a PS5 to a PC system? Because now I've got my PSVR 2 headset, and I might want to go experience things like Half-Life Alyx and Elite Dangerous and things that the PC provides that aren't available elsewhere. Well, that same thing is happening with the Quest buyers out there who have an aging Quest 2 system, or perhaps they even have a Quest 3 and are wondering, what am I missing out on with this new headset that it's got a different front on it, right? Like, that's all that you see when you see this image is exactly what's different. So yes, we see this as a major, like, this is the upgrade path if you're a Quest 2 buyer, and we've tried to recommend that since last year. The other I'll let you talk, David. And then there was another comment I wanted to talk about with the person saying that we're overplaying the impact VR will have.
Yeah, so I mostly agree with saying that this will be an upgrade path for many Quest 2 owners, but I think the main focus here will be on new people. This will be on people who like the idea of a headset that can do both VR and mixed reality, but didn't want to fork out the $500 for a Quest 3. I think for a lot of Quest 2 owners, the time to upgrade will be as these big titles that don't support Quest 2 start launching. So Batman, for example, being one of those flagship titles that's coming out with Quest 3 only. That will be the kind of game that gets people to upgrade. I think if someone's a really big Quest 2 user, if you've had your Quest 2 for like 2 or 3 years and you love it and you really want to jump to the next level, the Quest 3, not the S, but the proper Quest 3 is probably your biggest upgrade path, because then you're upgrading not just the chip and to mixed reality, but you're also getting those pancake lenses, which are not going to be in this headset. Those pancake lenses make a really big difference to visual comfort. And that's something that I think you don't want to miss out if you can't afford it. But of course, there are a lot of people who simply either can't afford the $500 or don't want to. I think a great path for certain Quest 2 owners today would be to get one of these things for yourself and then hand your Quest 2 over to a friend so you can start playing co-op VR games with a friend. That's going to make a dramatic difference to how much you use VR as well as how much enjoyment you get out of it, because as we've said many times and many people have, the magic of VR in many ways is that direct social experience. Obviously, if that's not something you can afford to do, you can't afford to give things away, then you could just sell on eBay, and I'm sure by then you're still going to get something like $100 or so for your Quest 2.
And people in the comments are talking about a refurbishment program or a buyback program. Again, we've got the links, we've got the trail of URLs to prove we are on the case. David Heaney there with an editorial, I think a couple of years ago now, pointing out how Meta should do a buyback program. And in fact, even on this show with our audience, we had a great comment a couple weeks back suggesting that those Quest 2s are beautiful developer kits or education devices. You could rip out a lot of the Meta services out of the Quest 2s and still have a functional like VR headset if you gave it access to the cameras for positional tracking, right? But like you still have a basic device there that can do base VR and teach a bunch of people about the power of VR and standalone. You don't need any other hardware to make it function. And you've got tens of millions of them out there. You could repurpose those for some other task, and it's just up to Meta whether they see that path available to them. But I want to get to this comment, David, about whether we're overplaying VR.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Go to that at the end of the session. Let's focus on Quest 3S specifically for now. I fully agree. As Ian pointed out, we wrote this editorial calling for an upgrade program. Meta absolutely should be doing it. Quest 1 was the first time that this should have happened. When Quest 2 was released and Quest 1 was deprecated, there were all these people that had spent more money just a few months earlier for an inferior device. It's how Apple, in many ways, bring people along with their trade-in program. Google does it with their Pixel phones. If Meta wanted to, it could, and it definitely should. A question here from Paul Tuff asking, so why does the Quest 3S exist if Quest 2 could have just been left on the market? It's a good question at surface, and the answer is because this thing will be able to play all the same games and content as Quest 3, right? From a developer perspective, you build for Quest 3 and Quest 3S, and there is no functional difference, right? To the user, yes, there are different lenses, and there's a different physical display. But from a capability perspective, this thing still has the color pass-through. It still has the side cameras, so it can do inside-out body tracking. It still has the ringless controllers. It is identical from a development perspective. So if Meta just left Quest 2 on the market, then everyone who bought Quest 2 can't play the Batman game coming up. They can't play the other Quest 3 exclusives coming up, like Starship Home. And you can find an article on UploadVR if you search for every Quest 3 game that isn't coming to Quest 2. There is a growing list now of these games that just are not going to come to Quest 2. So if you leave it on the market, people buying a new headset can't get in, right? That's the whole point of this thing. It's to let people access color mixed reality, access these higher fidelity standalone VR games without going all the way to $500.
All right, let's talk about overplaying the impact of VR. So I ran an experiment earlier this week where I connected the Meta Ray-Ban glasses to the Quest 3 VR headset. I sideloaded the MetaView app, which is the app that lets you manage content that is captured on the Meta glasses, and directly connected the glasses to the headset. Then I downloaded videos captured on the glasses to the Quest 3. And I'm gonna run a thought experiment or talk. I've got an article to back this up, but I'm going to talk about a thought experiment here. What does a future look like without phones and laptops and computers, or PCs as we know them? What does the future of personal computing look like? And that's what we talk in and day out on the show. We've talked to the world's experts, everyone we can possibly find on this topic. And there's a man named Michael Abrash, who is the head of research at Meta, has been there for more than a decade now, brought in from Valve, the competitor in this market, if you're a close follower of this, right? Hired from Valve to Meta to chart out what the future of personal computing looks like for Meta. And a couple of years ago now, I went and talked to Michael Abrash in front of a wall of VR headsets that they had designed, right? A wall of prototypes are sitting behind him that represent probably hundreds of millions of dollars of investment from this company to try to find out what the future looks like. And I asked him, what does the future look like? And Abrash tells me, we're going to have glasses and we're going to have headsets. Headsets are what you're going to use when you're home, and the device you're going to use every time you aren't using your headset is glasses, right? So you've got a future being imagined here where you've got your personal computers being glasses and VR headsets. Now, why? Why would that? What is the advantage? Are we really overplaying it? These are bricks on our face. They're not always going to be bricks. They're losing weight over time. They're getting smaller. And they don't connect. They don't have apps. They don't connect to the internet because they don't have LTE wherever you go. Well, you could put LTE on your watch. You've got LTE. You've got a cellular connection on your watch. That's one way to get these things smarter, right? What you have is developing is Meta trying to imagine a future after the phone, and they are this close from realizing it. They've spent. I wrote out this math, but I gotta point out this math to you again because it's so stupid that nobody else is pointing out this math, right? Okay, 2014, Meta acquires Oculus for $3 billion. They also acquire WhatsApp for $19 billion. That's $22 billion spent in the year 2014 to build the technology I just effectively tested on Meta glasses connecting to Meta Quest. What you can do with the Meta glasses is take a WhatsApp call and show your view to anyone in the world directly from the glasses through your phone to relay it out there into the world. That's mind-bendingly different. Like you haven't experienced a video call where you're looking through someone's perspective. There's not many people out there that have experienced what that's like, but it's a different thing. You have access to your hands. You can show people around an environment. You've got, you can cook, you can do everything and have a person inside the glasses with you. This is the exact same functionality that Apple Vision Pro offers inside of their VR headset. So here you've got glasses from Meta that do the same thing as a headset from Apple, and they're both shipping in the same year. Like, what is this? Are we really, or are we making this up? Like the point. All right, so back to the VR headset. So I've expressed some of the benefits of the glasses, right? You can have a person inside of your view and see outside of your eyes at any given moment. But over on the VR headset side of things, it is a private display. It is perhaps the most private display that's ever been invented because anyone walking by your seat in a bus or plane, whatever, will not see what you're looking at. They will see you inside of a VR headset. And it's going every year going forward, it's going to seem a little bit more strange and weird that we did not have privacy on our screens, right? Because you have complete privacy inside of a VR headset, and not just complete privacy, you have an unlimited landscape of screen space on which to display all of your content. If you want to go and look through your photos from a trip, you can fan out 1,000 of them all in front of you, and you can pick through them as if they were like photos on your floor. It's a different form of file management that is ahead of us. There's a different form of communicating with everyone when David here in London can be teleported into the seat right next to me. Yes, we look like cartoon avatars right now, but that's not always going to be the case. And in fact, you see those super high-end, almost photorealistic avatars on the Apple Vision Pro headset that costs $3,500. I think I've made the case. All right, David, go ahead.
Yeah, I strongly agree with most of what you're saying there. And I think you pretty much addressed the commenter's follow-up comment when they said, when I say overplaying, I mean, I personally don't see VR being the next smartphone level of mass adoption. It will have its place, but it will be an option only some will take up. Yeah, I see this kind of sentiment a lot. And my response would be that this is a straw man. No one credible is saying that VR headsets are going to replace smartphones. It doesn't even make sense, right? Like these are, one is a portable device you take outdoors with you everywhere. Another is a device that you use indoors for general computation, mostly seated. And as Ian has pointed out, these are two distinct devices, glasses and headsets. And when we talk about VR headsets, mixed reality headsets, whatever you want to call them, the market potential here is of replacing tablets and laptops, not of your phone. And so if you do have a device that lets you do the same things you do on your tablet and laptop, except on as many screens as you want, wherever you want, as large as you want, that becomes particularly compelling, as well as, of course, as Ian pointed out, beaming a photorealistic version of your friend to yourself. These are all things that are going to arrive in mainstream products by the end of the decade. And then in the longer term, you start to see these more portable devices, these AR glasses, emerge as a separate product category, not a replacement, a separate product category that will at first for a very long time work alongside your phone and alongside your watch, and eventually over the very long time start to entirely supplant the functionality of your phone to the point where there may be a lot of people that are walking around with just a watch and glasses for their everyday computing. But
Yep.
we're ready to move on to the next topic there, unless you have anything you want to add in.
Yeah, I don't want to go off on another tirade there because I could. I feel very strongly about this because we've seen just too much evidence going in this direction, and I'm seeing people complain about the weight. Right, you've got a big screen beyond out there for $1,000, and you will not complain about the weight out of that headset. So it's just. We see all of these things being evaporated out of the complaints one at a time. And I will argue that the idea of being disconnected from your family that are in the same room is solved in software, large part. We see it in Vision Pro quite a bit. They've done a lot of work to put to keep that connection active while you're inside of a VR headset, right? A person walks up to you, they appear like a ghost in your VR headset because the headset is running computer vision algorithms to pull that person in. And then the idea that you are the only person watching that media, that is also a software problem that will be solved over time. It will, we will achieve a point where it's really easy for you to mirror what you're seeing on headset to a nearby screen, and it just being the video itself, right? Not everything you see, and everyone is watching the same thing together in the same room over time.
Yeah, I'll just address a few comments here because this is really sort of livened up the comment here. People do have opinions. We've got that original commenter again, point again, glasses in VR are too isolating. That will be its main adoption barrier. And you have a similar comment here from Paul Tuff, who said, seems very limited. Can't share that with your loved ones. And how is that communicating? Well, firstly, what percentage of laptop and tablet usage today is shared, right? A very small percentage. Yes, among family with tablets, but the vast majority of your time when you're using your laptop, you're sitting at a desk, you're hunched over it, you're entirely isolated from everyone else anyway. The other thing is that when we talk about beaming in your friend, we're talking about remote communication. And that's not a new thing, right? Everyone remotely communicates with people all day today. You have WhatsApp, you have iMessage, you have FaceTime, you have Skype, you have Zoom. The problem is that they all suck because they're nothing like being in person. And so when we talk about these photorealistic avatars, it's not about replacing being in person with your friend. We're talking about the friends that today you communicate with on WhatsApp because you've come home from work and you're not going to drive 30 miles to go see them. Or maybe they live in another country. Maybe they live on the other side of the planet. Today, your best chance is either a text chat, a video call, or to play games with them with their audio in your ear in this completely disembodied sense. The potential of these mixed reality headsets, and eventually in glasses too in the next decade, is that it can feel almost as if they're sitting next to you, even though they're on the other side of the planet. So it's a complete misconception to say that these things are isolating. It's just that you're not understanding that this is a replacement for current telepresence, which sucks.
Yeah, so to be clear, we're not saying that phones are going away anytime soon. They will be a major part of the 21st century for a very long time. But put my thought experiment in context of your experience with your phone. That glasses scenario, headset scenario I'm discussing, where let's imagine a long bus trip across the United States or across Europe, and all you've got with you is your glasses and your headset. All those arguments you're saying about isolating and distracting you from the world around you, I can make about your phone on that same trip. What you could do on that bus is when you're on the bus and unable to actually see anything cool, you put on the headset and do your work, do your socialization, meet with others, play a whole bunch of VR games, talk with any, assuming there's a Wi-Fi connection, right? If there's no Wi-Fi connection, then you just enjoy all of your media, music, videos, games that you've got locally downloaded. Enjoy all of those for hours on end privately in the seat you've got. Then you arrive at your destination. That headset comes off your head, goes into the bag, and you've got a pair of glasses on your head with no distractions whatsoever. There is no cellular connection. You're just going around completely immersed in the moment. And anytime you want to show that moment to somebody else, you hit the capture button on your glasses and you record it for someone else to see. What I'm trying to point out with this thought experiment is that your criticisms about what VR and does to isolate you, and the friction that these companies are going to have in weaning you off of your cell phone also are detriments to the existing platforms, right? Those annoying notifications. How many people get notifications via their phone that waste their time every single day? I would wager it's 95% of our audience, if not 100% of our audience, who get at least one notification on their phone per day that was absolutely useless, if not 10 or 20, right? And that goes away through that scenario I just described, right? Where you don't have this legacy phone platform bothering you.
Yeah, and again, just to kind of finish off on that isolating thing, it is just hilarious to walk down any street, go to any cafe, sit at any train station, any airport, go to any public space, and try to tell me that today's platforms are not isolating. Because what do you see? Everyone, their neck painfully strained, staring down at this little rectangle in their hand, typing into a message box of some sort. God, this VR technology is going to be so isolating. You wouldn't notice if an alien walked past them. They wouldn't notice if a UFO flew over, because we already live in these deeply isolating devices, and we already live in a metaverse. It's just a text form that appears in a little rectangle in our hand. That becoming more immersive and becoming eyes up, letting you actually look up and notice what's happening around you, is an improvement, not a detriment. But yeah, we need to move on. We spent quite a lot on this topic. Let's talk about.
I appreciate it though. You got to see the real David Heaney and the real Ian Hamilton there. I think, we don't, to the one person in our comments saying you expect journalists to examine the facts, we will be examining the facts and seeing whether this belief that David and I have about the future is going to come and pass. And it's to our own detriment. We've been wrong about the time scale of when these things are going to arrive. However, we have not been wrong about the overall direction. So let's move on to HTC's teasing here. David, what is this latest tease?
We're not quite sure what it is yet. All they've shown is this faded silhouette of a new headset, and HTC hasn't released a truly new headset in quite a while now. The one piece of information we do have that's essentially a clue is that earlier this year, Qualcomm, the company that makes the chips in all standalone headsets except for Apple's, Apple obviously makes its own chips, said that HTC will be one of the 5 companies to use the XR2 Plus Gen 2 chipset. That chipset being a higher end variant of the XR2 Gen 2 that's in Quest 3. So the 5 companies that will use that will be Samsung for its headset, Sony for its enterprise content creation headset, Immersive Visor, which we're going to be trying out in September, Play for Dream MR, the Chinese headset that we talked about around a month ago on this show that isn't coming to Western markets, and a HTC headset that was not named but was confirmed to exist by Qualcomm. Now, that an initial assumption there would be that HTC is about to announce some sort of high-end Vision Pro Samsung headset competitor, right? That would be the initial assumption. However, we did see a claim on X by Brad Lynch, the VR enthusiast, saying that they had multiple sources telling them that this thing will be basically a refresh of the Vive Focus 3 that will still have the XR2 Gen 1 chip, so the chip in Quest 2 that is now 4 years old, and Fresnel lenses. So HTC has disappointed people in the past when teasing new headsets, and if this claimed leak is true, I see our commenters are already pointing it out, this claimed leak. If that claimed leak is true, and again, there's no verification of that, that is just one person claiming to have sources, then this thing is going to be immensely disappointing. However, according to that leak, the 2 interesting features that this thing will add is eye tracking and DisplayPort direct connection. So essentially, this thing would be like it's very hard to categorize exactly what this would be. It would be a Quest 2 in the sense of lenses, a Quest 3 in the sense of sensors, having kind of color pass-through and depth sensing. It would have eye tracking, DisplayPort input, but still using Fresnel lenses and the old XR2 Gen 1 chipset. It's going to depend on what price this thing comes at to see whether where it sits in the market, but it looks like its focus may be on being a PC headset, quite interestingly, because the only thing this thing would really have going for it is having eye tracking and DisplayPort. Its other specs would just be woefully outdated for 2024.
Yeah, I think David covered it there, and I want to make just the commentary on marketing and leaks, right? So contextually there, HTC has been a shell of its former self for many years. It's not been the company that a lot of VR enthusiasts were expecting it to become back in 2016 when they partnered with Valve to build the Index headset, right? The HTC Vive. They partnered with Valve to build the HTC Vive in 2016, and then Valve, of course, came back with its own headset built by themselves in 2019, and that's been a path where it's felt like HTC has had to find its place in the market separate to what Valve is doing. And what that's meant is for the viewers that were kind of drawn in 2016 as a consumer play, they've been watching HTC and wondering whether they're going to come up with a follow-up headset. But what that's meant is like HTC has leaked very purposefully teased in little drips starting near the end of the year and usually pushing out even to CES, right? Like if these leaks, if this follows what HTC has done in the past, they drip leak all the way into CES and then reveal something at CES that isn't intended for the consumer market anytime soon because of various factors being like price or specs.
Yeah, that's a very good point about the disparity between their marketing and their product offering. They often do these very consumer-focused marketing, kind of building up hype amongst VR enthusiasts. And the reality is that for many years now, HTC has been almost irrelevant in the consumer market. And its focus has been the enterprise market, where, to balance this out, I will say HTC has seen decent success. They build their products with features that enterprise care about. For example, Vive Focus 3 has a swappable back battery, so they can, without having to recharge the headset back up, they just can put in a new battery. They have like this docking cradle. They had wrist trackers and arbitrary object trackers, things that Meta don't have. They had QR code scanning and tracking. They had co-location long before Meta had it, which allowed it to be used in things like VR arcades. When it comes to the non-consumer applications, not through just outright better hardware, but by focusing on the specific, more niche, less mainstream needs of these businesses, HTC has managed to be successful. But as Ian pointed out, that's not much of a consolation for the VR enthusiast or general VR consumer who's looking at HTC's marketing and thinking, oh, are they about to announce something for me? The answer is they're almost certainly not. Daniel Kaz has an interesting comment here saying that this is essentially a PSVR 2 competitor. That's a very interesting point because we are a few weeks away now from PlayStation VR 2's PC adapter, and it will also be a Fresnel lens headset with eye tracking that's coming to PC. Now, PSVR 2's eye tracking will not actually be supported on PC through that driver. It's possible that the community will be able to come up with a third-party driver or some sort of hacky workaround that gets that working. But if HTC can come out with this headset and does allow you to use that eye tracking in, Steam VR for things like foveated rendering, for things like VR chat avatars, that could be this kind of tiny niche that they hone in on. Of course, Quest Pro is already kind of serving that niche. So HTC would need to be pitching that around, well, instead of a compressed image, you can get this direct DisplayPort image. But again, it's really going to depend on the pricing, right? The current Vive Focus 3 is $1,300, but that includes a business license. They don't sell this thing to consumers. Well, you can buy it if you want, but you're getting this business license whether you like it or not. Is it possible that they could get this thing to maybe $800, kind of undercut Quest Pro? Or we'll have to see.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm tired of the leaks here because of the drip news and because of what David has suggested, that the drip news is sort of tailored to an audience that isn't served by the actual product. But we'll see. And again, to the last story on Meta, right? Meta has a gigantic PR department, marketing department. They've got tens of thousands of employees. HTC is a different organization. And so the way these organizations approach their marketing budget and how they get people to know that they've even got a new product is completely different. So you can't really compare the leaks that we see out of Meta to the leaks we get out of HTC, and they happen for different reasons.
Well, I wouldn't even call this as a leak, right? They're literally posting this on YouTube and social media, teasing a new headset. Paradise Decay in our comments, nice to see you, is pointing out that the PlayStation VR 2 PC adapter now has a Steam page and tagging us. Yeah, we know. We published an article about it 8 hours ago, I think now, maybe 7, 8 or 9 hours. I don't know exactly when. So you can read all about it on UploadVR.com. But very good to point out as well, because we are now just 2 weeks away from that launch, and we'll be looking into that, and we'll be bringing you our impressions of how good of a PC headset PSVR 2 is. It looks like we are going to get, for the first time in a while, sub $1,000 options for PC. There really hasn't been that in quite a while. It's been very much so a focus on either completely standalone headsets that use compression to support PC VR, or these really high-end headsets that are thousands of dollars, like one we will discuss at the end of this show.
I'm seeing LL mentioning that they had an HTC Evo 3D back in the day, and it could take spatial videos before it was cool. I also tested that device before I was entirely focused on VR for my career. That HTC sent me one of those to test. We got Mighty Coconut there in the comments. Hello to Mighty Coconut, and congrats on the launch of Wallace and Gromit. We've got the 22-minute tour video that you can go check out on our channel right now. And I just I promoted over on social media this incredible comment I got from Don Carson while doing that tour, talking about how there is a trend that they are noticing amongst people that they are partnering with Mighty Coconut. They're noticing that a lot of creatives early on in their career imagined themselves making a mini golf course. And I'm one of those people. When I was a kid, I made mini golf courses in the backyard with my brother, right? It's such an easy thing to do. You just make a little hole, or you just put a cup over there and put a ball into it, and you can make your own multi-course thing. Well, apparently that is a common experience across the creative landscape, and it is actually aiding Mighty Coconut quite a bit in finding these partners out there who have been left wanting in the real world. They've been left without any development partners to say, hey, let's go build a physical mini golf park for your property. Well, here comes Mighty Coconut with a skilled team of developers ready to come to your property and say, hey, we'll build you a mini golf park. Just, let's just work out the details and get started, right? And that is what's happening. And it's I've got that audio clip. You can go see that in the video. You can go check it out on social media. I think it's a very impactful, meaningful quote that summarizes, you're not alone if you see the advantage of VR development over traditional development. Mighty Coconut. Stop putting our coffee cups on the floor, they said. You're sitting too close to the TV, they said. Yeah, I like that way of thinking about classic gaming, right? That is the meme, right? You were told as kids that you're sitting too close to the TV, and what did we do? We strapped the TV to our face, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool when you can do that.
Yeah, I hate to be the actually guy on that, but the distinction I always make, that is one of the most common things you see in general media for VR. Oh, why are we strapping these things so close to our face? I understand it's a joke, but just for the sake of accuracy, the image that you see in a VR headset is focused out to typically 2 meters, sometimes to infinity. So from your eyes perspective, you're nowhere near the screen, right? Physically, it's there, but optically, it's 2 meters out. Paul Tuff in our comments pointing out something useful, that our video description doesn't link to our website. We will get that fixed for next week. Thank you for pointing that out. If you don't know about our website, it's uploadvr.com. Uploadvr.com. That's where our main output is. You will see our articles. We try to bring you the latest and greatest AR and VR news, reviews, and industry analysis. So please, if you do watch the show but don't read our website, go to uploadvr.com.
I like LL's comment. We can emulate sitting right next to a screen once we have the varifocal lenses. Yeah, so we'll get there. I think it's time for us to move on to Magic Leap's layoffs. So this is going to be tough for me to get through. So let me let David give whatever is the news here before I give a lot of my first person commentary here on what I've encountered with Magic Leap.
Sure. So what we're seeing here is significant layoffs again at Magic Leap, the company that did launch the first consumer AR headset, Magic Leap 1, back in 2018. It saw pretty much no success because it cost north of $2,000, but had this really tiny field of view, just like most transparent AR optics, and didn't have the kind of content to bring in consumers. They, just like we talked about with HTC, they shifted to enterprise. They shifted to focus on providing these big companies and government agencies with this technology instead of consumers. And that's what they've seen decent success with in Magic Leap 2, which is what you see on screen now. And we covered recently how Magic Leap had partnered with Google, this big announcement that they were going to partner with Google. And in that partnership, they said that the companies were going to combine Magic Leap's leadership in optics and manufacturing with Google's technology platforms. And what we've seen from these layoffs now is that, according to some of the people laid off, and that Magic Leap is no longer going to make its own devices. That's reading between the lines. They've laid off the people who are in charge of making the devices, but what they still have is the people that are making the optics. And this is now into my speculation from now on. I speculate that what we're going to see here is that Magic Leap is going to be a core technology provider, where instead of building a Magic Leap 3, they build the optical systems that go in to Google's AR headset and maybe even other companies' transparent AR headsets going forward. Because what Magic Leap does have, its special sauce, is that they currently are the technology leader in transparent AR optics in terms of what is actually shipped. I'm not talking about what's being shown in a trade show or in a lab. In terms of what's actually being mass produced, there is no better transparent AR optics system than Magic Leap 2. So they're leveraging that. They're going to be the technology provider. An analogy you could make could be somewhat maybe to chip providers like Qualcomm, but a better analogy might be to how you see some Chinese smartphones now powered by Zeiss Optics, and there are some other companies, I think Leica. These are companies that used to make cameras. Some of them do still make cameras, but now a huge part of their business is providing just the camera modules, or at least lenses, to smartphone companies. I think that's Magic Leap's play here. They say Google AR headset, and then in the small text, powered by Magic Leap Optics.
Yeah, so I guess it's interesting to transition to this from our last subject where we were discussing eye strain and discomfort in VR. We will be on the case of whether, people are hurt by VR headsets in any way, shape, or form by the optical path. Like, let us know if there's any uh, research or studies that indicate anything there. But the reason I bring that up is because Ronnie Abovitz, the CEO, former founder or former CEO and founder of Magic Leap, has made comments to that effect over the years to try to uh, sway investors to invest more in their idea that the opposite path, the VR path, is actually not great for your brain, not great for your eyes. And he kept arguing that their path is great for the eyes and great for the brain, while showing up with very little actual evidence to back up those claims. Now, um, we got word that there were recent layoffs at Magic Leap. This follows major layoffs back in 2020, 2021. I can't remember where it actually landed, but they blamed COVID-19 as taking a lot of the oomph out of the investment market and making it impossible for Magic Leap to go and raise another round of funding that was bigger than its last round in funding. And going back here, following this whole story as it's gone over many, many years, I was in the audience at Oculus Connect 1, the very first MetaConnect event in 2014. And I sat down next to an employee of Magic Leap. And I'm like, what are you doing? What can you say? Because even back then, a whole decade ago, they had an air of complete secrecy around everything they're doing. And people who wanted to see their most advanced technology were put under non-disclosure agreements in order to go see their most advanced research technology. And it seems like they got a ton of investment on the order of billions of dollars of investment based on the demos provided under those NDA'd non-disclosure agreement demos. That technology that was being shown in those demos, I believe, to be the work of Brian Schoengert, I think is his name. I might be mispronouncing his last name, but that is a researcher from the Northwestern United States who toiled away at this approach to AR optics that was deeply inspiring to the people who actually saw it in this test bed scenario. The problem is what Magic Leap actually went and shipped in these headsets was a very far cry from the promise in those demos, the things given under NDA to a select group of people. And you're talking now about a company that is primarily owned by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia or its supposedly independent investment arm. That was one of the early funders. So there's two big early funders of Magic Leap. There's Google, and then there's Saudi Arabia. I believe these two organizations footed the bill for a large segment of the investment and the ownership stake that these companies take out of Magic Leap. What this all means, and it goes to the comments that I'm seeing where people are starting imagining Magic Leap converting into a technology supplier. Who wants Magic Leap's technology? Who's going to pay for those licensing agreements? We could see Meta, we could see Google, we could see Apple maybe work out some kind of a licensing patent sharing agreement of some kind. However, I think those companies don't want to be tied to patents that have ties to Saudi Arabia. If you want to go to a global landscape of your technology product, do you really need patents and technology that's only useful in the United States? Or do you need technology that's useful worldwide? And do you need like IP in all nations to protect your product platform? That's not to, so this is not to say like Magic Leap could have a very bright future as a licensing partner, but the line between licensing partner and patent troll is a very, very thin one. And these major technology companies, like I'm describing, Meta and Apple, they want to own their own technology, right? They want to own their own path. They don't want to rely on anyone else. So, like, doing a 5-year licensing agreement with Magic Leap isn't going to work. You need a lifetime, permanent access to all of that technology. And that's a one-time payment probably from one big company to another smaller company. I just, Roni and Brian, those two co-founders or two people that were brought in very early, they're gone. They're not at this organization anymore. And so I have this very fundamental question of, did the dream that they pursued, is it gone? Is it no longer at Magic Leap? And I have yet to hear from someone still at Magic Leap who says, yeah, we're going to deliver that fiber scanning display that we teased out a decade ago. I just don't see the path here where this becomes something that is valuable. I'm sorry, but like they could still do it. It's very hard for me to see this path of like 10 years of development and you've got patents to show for it, and you're going to use those patents for what? Like, are you going to troll or license? Like, what is the path there?
Yeah, from a personnel perspective, many of the original Magic Leap team, a lot of the people behind both the hardware and software today work at Apple and Meta. Most of them Meta, some of them Apple. Some of them are the people who brought us Vision Pro, right, in those final years. Some of them are the people who've brought us Quest 3, and many of them are working on the AR glasses project at Meta right now. When it comes to a technology perspective, yeah, I don't agree to just say they just have patents, right? At the end of the day, they still do have it. As I've said over and over, Magic Leap 2 is a real product that enterprise is using. It is the state of the art right now in transparent AR, but the question I wonder is, why didn't Google acquire? Why is Google just licensing? I think they may be waiting for the value of the company to deflate to the point where they can acquire, and then this just becomes the technology stack behind Google's transparent AR glasses eventually.
And that's of course right. The ownership stake, whatever remaining ownership stake that Google still has in that company, becomes it's like a discount when it gets to that state, right? Like that's the part that they don't have to pay for, that everyone else does have to pay for if they want to go and acquire the company. So I think our audience is following along with us pretty closely here on wondering what's going to happen here. And I appreciate the comment on OC1 being a special moment, because Magic Leap had its own special moment. They had their own convention. They held a convention in Los Angeles where it would have cost millions of dollars to host this event. And they had a fitting flow where you could go and put their Magic Leap 1 headset on, and they would like test your prescription out, I think, beforehand, and then get you, or maybe it was the IPD. They would size your face for the headset properly with a really like a flow that I've seen duplicated or mimicked by what Apple does in its store. So you go in and get measured, and then you can test out the headset with the proper visual effect. Well, Magic Leap was there and did some of that first with this conference. But my point being, Oculus held an event for VR in 2014 that they were already acquired by Meta. The money for that event basically came out of Facebook's pocket to realize that whole event back in 2014 to promote VR. It was already it was already moving towards being a done deal that Oculus was owned by Facebook. Well, when Magic Leap went and spent millions of dollars to host this developer event, that money came out of Magic Leap's investor, in a pot of money in order to manufacture headsets for people. And what did they do? They had a bizarre event for like 2 or 3 hours with what was it? Was it Neil Stevenson up on stage hacking into the Magic Leap 1 and showing that he has like a terminal command system into people? If you go watch that video, it needs to live on. If we don't have a local copy of that whole 3-hour event, we need it for historical purposes, because it was a bizarro event to see these people get up. You had the special effects supervisor for the Matrix movies. You had Roni Abovitz, the CEO, and you had, I think, Neil Stevenson the three of them waxing poetic for 3 hours about how the future's going to have layers, and you're going to have layers on top of layers, and you've got X verses and like they would make up terms and words out of thin air, like it was something that God or a scientist had made for them. And it was the most embarrassing, frustrating thing to see as a watcher of this.
Yeah, I think we just lost Ian there temporarily, at least. But I would very much so echo that that conference was cringeworthy. It was typical tech industry overhype and bluster and BS with no substance. The one thing I do want to push against, though, is this idea I've seen in the comments and from some other people that, Magic Leap had this brilliant technology in the labs, and if only they could get it out, then that would have solved everything. The problem is that so do all these companies, right? In the research labs, I've tried some of these headsets. Ian's tried some of these headsets. So have others. In the research labs, these companies have incredible, amazing things that even products in 10 years aren't going to arrive at in certain specs. The problem is, and this is a theme that we've repeated many times on this show, is that there is a massive difference between making one of something and being able to mass produce it affordably. Those are completely different things. Prototypes and products are somewhat related in the sense that some prototypes have some features that can be productized, but when it comes to some of these things that people saw in the lab, there was no way that those things were ever going to be able to be mass produced at scale. The supply chain doesn't exist. Some of the things are just too fundamentally expensive to arrive anytime soon. Some of them are literally hand built and hand tweaked down to, every pixel. These are things that just aren't going to be able to be shipped. But as I keep saying, what they have shipped in Magic Leap 2 is pretty remarkable. And I'll demonstrate this by our classic UploadVR field of view chart that we love to show on this show, where you can see here the field of view of the human eye, the field of view of a Meta Quest 3 headset, and then in white here you see the X-Rail Air 2 Ultra, but this is pretty much the exact same field of view as HoloLens 2, as all of the X-Rail clones out there, be it Rokid, I think someone else mentioned one of them, all of these things that are called, AR glasses today that aren't really AR glasses, they're media glasses, they're all just copies of X-Rail technology. They're within this field of view, and what Magic Leap 2 does uniquely is pushes to a significantly taller field of view. I think now we have Ian back here.
Yeah, Davin making the joke that Roni found me. Yeah, it's not too funny of a joke to me because of the history of Saudi Arabia, to be honest. But whatever. Let's move on to our next subject.
Yeah, I think we can move on. One of the things I was just pointing out was just this idea that, Magic Leap had these things in the lab. Doesn't matter because so do all these companies. And you and I have both tried crazy things in Meta's lab. There are people who have tried crazy things in Apple's lab and Microsoft's. And if it can't be productized, that's not anything that matters to a company's strategy in the near term. But yeah, let's talk about that MetaQuest news unless there's anything else you want to add there, Ian.
Talking about my internet access, I can't figure it out. So so if we go watch our games cast on Tuesday, I connected to that show using Ethernet. My Wi-Fi on this headset was off, and I'm using a USB-C dongle to connect through my router directly using a wired Ethernet connection, and I wasn't able to do that this week. I can't figure out what magic scenario I need to do to get that Ethernet connection to come up, but I do want to use the Ethernet because I think it will solve some of these issues for our audience.
Next time I'm in New York, though, I'll definitely pop in and have a look at your Wi-Fi network and see if anything is obviously going wrong there, because it should still work on Wi-Fi, right?
Oh, sure, right. I'm sitting right next to the base station that it's on. But whatever. Yeah. Let's move on to the next subject here on this is our MetaQuest section where we're going to specifically talk about the latest updates to the MetaQuest platform. So, David, why don't you get into that first one here?
Yeah, so there's three things we're going to talk about here. The first is the better mixed reality dynamic occlusion. The second is Meta AI coming to Quest headsets. And the third is the Meta Avatars graphics overhaul that was essentially just leaked there. So the first thing we will talk about, as I said, is the mixed reality occlusion. And this is such an important feature for a mixed reality headset. But as you'll know, Quest 3 only launched with static occlusion, not dynamic occlusion. And just to start here, if you're listening right now and you're thinking, what are they talking about? What is occlusion? This is quite a useful image from Meta that shows you the general concept. And so occlusion just means the ability of virtual objects to appear behind real objects, And that's harder than it sounds. If you don't think much about mixed reality, it might sound like this is something that is there by default. But if you think about it, when you render a virtual object, it's always going to appear above reality. You actually need to do some very complicated computer vision to make virtual objects really seem like they're there in the space. So when you're doing this for just pre-scanned geometry, like a scene mesh that the headset has generated, like Quest 3 can, that's called static occlusion. But the problem is, of course, that that's not going to support changing scenery nor moving objects, right? Like a person or your hand or your arm. Doing that from moving objects is called dynamic occlusion, and that's what we're talking about today. So Quest 3 got experimental dynamic occlusion a few days after launch, but it couldn't be shipped on the store. Then in December, they took away that restriction, and since December, developers have been able to support dynamic occlusion. The problem is that this is not a one-click solution. It's not a system-wide thing. This is a per-app thing that developers have to painstakingly implement. And so to date, we've only seen it in a few apps. Another reason is that currently the quality is very, very rough. That's because the depth map that the headset generates to do this occlusion, figuring out what is the depth of everything in this scene, this table is closer than the virtual object, so I have to show it in front, is very low resolution. And that's one of the things Meta has addressed with the V67 SDK update. One of the things they've done is make it higher quality. Another is they've made it significantly better optimized. So it now uses 80% less GPU and 50% less CPU. So developers have more resources to themselves. They're not having this taken away by adding this feature. They've made it easier to implement for developers. So they have more samples. They have the ability to apply this to shaders that use Unity's shader graph feature. And the more interesting feature, and you can go to uploadvr.com and see footage of me trying this out, is that they now have a clever solution to make it much higher quality specifically on your hands. So if you just use the depth API for dynamic occlusion, you'll see a very rough cutout of your hands that isn't even precise enough to get the gaps between your fingers. So it treats your hand like one giant blob. But what they've added is a feature that allows developers to enable this feature and have your hands excluded from the depth map. And what happens instead, and this is a sample that Meta provides to developers, is that they mask your hand out using the hand tracking mesh. So you have these two systems running together at the same time for dynamic occlusion. Specifically for your hands, it uses the hand tracking mesh to cut out finger by finger and do occlusion for that. And then from your wrist onwards, it's all being done with that coarse depth map that the headset is generating, raw dynamic occlusion. And not just your arms, of course, for everything else. Really recommend you go to uploadvr.com and watch the video for this. It's a really great solution. The only problem is that you do get this kind of awkward, patchy cutout at the wrist where your hand meets your the rest of your arm. They really need to find a way to smoothen that out a bit. And once they do that, I can't see a reason that any Quest mixed reality app wouldn't support this feature. If you want to try this out today in an app that does, try Niantic's Hello Dot. Now, to be clear, they use the old dynamic occlusion, not the upgraded version we're talking about today. V67, these improvements have not been supported by any app yet because they only released a few days ago.
James saying, who did this first Magic Leap? It's a different pathway to your eyes, right? So different difficulty of occlusion, right?
Well, not really. I mean, it's still, you have to render the virtual object with cutting parts out, right? What it seems like you're doing here is that you're selectively showing parts of the pass-through, but that, when you think about it, that's not really what's happening here. It's actually the opposite. It's that you're cutting out parts of each virtual object where there is physical geometry that should occlude it. And yes, it's true. That is something that Magic Leap did. One of the reasons they've been able to do that is because they used quite a powerful chip. They had this offloaded compute belt that no one else has done yet, right? Vision Pro offloads the battery, but Magic Leap is the only company that I can think of that also offloads the compute onto your belt. And that has a big disadvantage. That means that you have to clip this thing to your side, or you have a big sling over your arm, over your shoulder to carry it around, but you do get more compute. It is a great example of something Magic Leap did. One of the things that we have to credit Magically for is LumenOS, right? You can criticize the hardware, you can criticize the strategy, but their operating system has some of the things that are key features of visionOS that we praise so much. Some of these concepts of the shared space and having windows and volumes alongside together, they emerged in LumenOS first, as did some of these core features like Occlusion that are now coming to these much more affordable mixed reality headsets like Quest 3.
Yes. The thing that I guess I always think about on the Apple Vision Pro, and we really haven't gathered the full extent of this switch, is you put on a Vision Pro and you only see a black background for about 3 seconds, maybe less than that, before you're immediately seeing the pass-through view of your surrounding environment. And then you layer back in all your virtual content, your augmented content back into that view of the real world. If all your apps crash on your Apple Vision Pro, if the runtime that's running all of those things crashes, you will still, in most cases, see a pass-through view of your surroundings because of the way Apple has tiered the services running underneath what you see. And Meta has been catching up this year with things like occlusion, with things like blocking out, having automatic pass-through, things like that. Devs are having to also upgrade and update all of their software to bring it in line with what's clearly the path forward, at least from Apple's perspective.
Yeah, one of the huge advantages of Vision Pro's approach, visionOS, is that when new features are delivered and when upgraded features are delivered, in most cases, each app doesn't have to do anything. It all happens automatically in the shared space. So as we've said before, there are these two vastly different modes of visionOS. The shared space, where Apple is essentially controlling all of the rendering and input, and developers are just providing, models and shaders and some basic scripts. And then there are these full space apps. And the full space apps are just like Quest, where the apps still have to do all the updates of improvements themselves. But in this shared space, all this happens automatically. But it's interesting to note how differently Occlusion works on Vision Pro, because you have these headsets that are ostensibly doing something similar, but are doing it in a completely different way. On Vision Pro, you actually don't get dynamic occlusion from moving objects. What they do is they do a 2D cutout on each eye of your arm and hand, the exact same way that a Zoom call would mask you out from your background for putting in a virtual background for your webcam, right? It's literally on each eye, finding the shape of your arm and hand and cutting that out. And that has some very good results in that you get this really high quality cutout occlusion of your hand and arm, right? It's better for your arm and your hand than Quest 3's occlusion. But there's a peculiarity there, which is that if you're holding an object, that object isn't a part of a hand or arm. This algorithm looks for hand and arm. You're holding a cup of coffee and it's invisible in VR because it's not, this is just a 2D cutout. It's also will not be occluded in AR, right? So you'll hold up your hand and your hand will be in front of everything else, but your cup of coffee or your Steam Deck or your controller or whatever you're holding in your hand will be behind them. So very, very interesting. Whereas with Quest, everything that is a physical object is going to be occluded and support occlusion, but it's a much, much rougher occlusion, except now with your hand, where it's still not the same as Vision Pro, right? They're doing a very strange process if you were just doing this for occlusion. Hand tracking is obviously useful in itself, but they're doing a 3D skeletal, I'm going to have to say skeletal tracking of each point of your finger in your hand, generating a 3D hand mesh from that, and then getting a 2D perspective from that 3D hand mesh. And then obviously everything else is with just a generic depth map. So vastly different approaches to occlusion. Each has its own advantages. I imagine that over time, what we'll see is that both will be running, right? You will have dedicated models for your hand and arm, like we see on Vision Pro, and then a generic depth map for everything else, like we see on Quest 3. But we would hope in future hardware, like Quest 4, like Vision Pro 2, that generic depth map is going to be higher quality.
So there's a question here or a comment here from Thomas Ireland saying a constant slam will be the norm in 5 years with all devices. So that's the suggestion that simultaneous location and mapping will be running just in the background on all devices in 5 years. I think that's an interesting prediction to think about. what I would be curious to see in the next phase is how do sensors evolve just to get the information they need for that? How do you have sensors that are not quite cameras, but still get the information they need for the headset itself to exactly target its location and for it to exactly cut out your hands, right? The the going like the overall thing here is if you want to build a uh but there's a lot of ways I can go with this. The where your products are made in globally and the level of checking you're able to do on the components inside your hardware determines what markets you're able to sell that product to. You cannot sell your product to military or government use cases if certain components inside of your devices are developed in certain ways in certain places. You cannot even, I remember Broadcom, back when I was reporting on one of these companies, I think I had to sign a piece of paper that said I wasn't an agent for a foreign government in order to go to their offices and just meet with their executives for an article I was doing. Um, that's the level of importance of developing core components inside some of these devices. And everyone everywhere is currently pretty alarmed by the trend of cameras everywhere. Whereas, like, it's going to build, like everyone in our comments, people who are long watchers are expecting this slow sort of acclimation to cameras and sensors everywhere. We just have to also remember that on the flip side of this, there is a process here where the sensors can potentially do less than they currently do now in order to be lower cost components, but also to pass some of those tests of fear that people have.
Yeah, I think all these discussions are very much so geared towards glasses. Just to be clear to our viewers, I don't think we kind of made that clear. All of these mixed reality headsets are always running SLAM all the time anyway, right? Because you're always in a virtual environment or you're in an augmented reality environment where you need to positionally move around, unless you intentionally turn positional tracking off. But when it comes to glasses, you're right to say that we're going to see these devices that start to have more awareness of the world. Today, a lot of them either have no positional tracking or just rotational tracking. And as we start to get AR glasses, that's going to be an interesting trade-off there. You're not going to want to run it all the time for battery reasons, even when you do have these event sensors that are more designed for it. But I think that gets very, very off topic to talk about the different modes of glasses. We can talk about that another time as we did last week.
Yep. I think it's time to talk about are we on avatars or we got AI first? We got AI first.
AI. And I actually saw a question in our comments of someone asking us about what the timeline for that was going to be. So once I can find the image here, I will let you know. I can't seem to find the image, so I'll just go straight in and say what this is. It's that I have found the image. Here we go. So Meta AI, their conversational AI assistant, is coming to Quest headsets in the US and Canada in August. And so on Quest 3 specifically, it will also be able to see the world through the pass-through cameras and answer questions about what it sees. And this is a capability that already exists on the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, Ian's favorite thing to talk about, part of the VR Download drinking show that every time Ian mentions the Ray-Ban glasses, you take a shot, and all of our viewers are going to be horribly drunk right now. But they're basically bringing that exact same capability over to Quest. And on Quest 2, it will be there in audio form, so you can ask questions like this, can you give me a local place to go to play basketball? You could ask anything that you would ask something like ChatGPT. This is Meta's alternative to ChatGPT that is powered by their own open source Llama series of AI models. And it is in this instantiation on Quest headsets and Ray-Ban glasses, multimodal. So you do get this visual capability. And on the glasses, one thing that I think this can be incredibly useful for is translation, right? So you're on holiday in a country that at some point in the future supports Meta AI. And you see a sign that you don't know what it says, and you just go, "Hey Meta, what does that sign say?" And it tells you immediately what it says. This isn't going to be a game changer for Quest headsets. This isn't like, I don't think there were many people who were just really saying, "I can't wait until there's an AI assistant on these things," but it's going to be somewhat useful for certain scenarios where maybe you're in the middle of a game and you wanted to look up a piece of information. Maybe you're just in your headset and your phone's off charging and you have a question that you would normally ask Siri or ChatGPT. now you can solve that. And I think over time they're going to really want to expand this. Right now, this can only see pass through on Quest 3. It can't see virtual objects or VR. They've indicated that in future they want to be able to have it see VR as well. One thing you could easily imagine there is walkthroughs, right? So you're stuck in a particular game and you ask the assistant, "Oh, what should I do here?" And it can kind of maybe give you a clue in a puzzle or something like that.
Yeah, people in the comments saying Meta's stance on AI should be.
There we go. So apologies for that, folks. I pressed the wrong button. That was my bad completely.
Yeah, we are we are not doing it on purpose. I promise you. Yeah, we're not blipping out at the right mentions.
Manual mistake. So
yeah.
You want to continue your thought there, Ian?
Yeah, the comment was about commending Meta on its AI stance of openness. I'm still very I'm still very critical and in questioning of how these models are trained and the ethics of training the models, and the sort of fallout from training the models. Like what do it feels to me like these AI models devalue human input, and they also devalue the inputs of the models that they've made. They've considered it public good that they're now using for private purposes, where our commenters are suggesting that they've got an open stance, but it's also like, you're not giving people any money for training your model on their public information, and you're then profiting privately in your own way of pretending like you're necessary to provide these services to other people while having built your AI on a public good, right? Like that's essentially the problem I have there.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big, deep philosophical issue that is going to be a major focus of public conversation about these models over the next years. This is not something unique to Meta, of course. This will be applicable to OpenAI, to Microsoft, to Anthropic, to Google, to all of these companies. You can make the argument on the other side that if I were interested in a topic as a human and I went and read a bunch of websites about that topic, and then someone asked me a question about that topic and I replied based on what I had learned on someone's website, do I owe them something financially or legally, or have I learned this? You could argue that what these systems are doing is learning, as long as they're not just rote memorizing and spitting out these facts, which, from a basic information theory, they can't be, because their training set, the model, this output is not as large as the training set, right? That's just like physically, they can't be rote memorizing. It's just not physically possible. It's just this concept of learning. There are valid arguments on both sides, but I don't think this is as simple as just saying, oh, this is just using other people's content. And as the commenter is pointing out here, Google's been doing this for years, right? There are certain Google searches where you search for a question, and instead of having to click through a link, you get a summary that is just using a very basic machine learning model to pull out the relevant part of an article.
Yeah. So I search. If you go search for the word Confucamus, it's a word spoken in the opening of Mad Max as like I'm screwed, but in Latin. And I think it might be a made up word, but I tweeted having watched this movie and was like, oh, that's an interesting word to see up on screen. And I tweeted about it, and Google served that up as one of the first search results over when I went and tried to search for the meaning of this word. I saw a full circle loop of information back from my own watching of this movie like 5 years ago to searching to try to find more about this stupid word a few years later, and Google providing me no relevant info. My point being there, David, is like, You have all noticed the decreasing quality of Google search. It's because AI results are being fed back into Google at such a rate that they can't even sort out the bullshit from the real anymore, and it's decreasing the quality of the underlying search results. That's happening a lot of places right now because of the mass processing that you're discussing. Like get that in the abstract ethical morality of what they're doing. It like is the process any different from learning as a human? I get that, but again, it's like you're training a person to consume all of the internet and then claiming that the things that that person learned were like came out of the ether. Like they just where did they come from? That person learned that off of anything. It's separating. It is very much separating value from the platforms that did it, and it's paying. It's like feeding back in unexpected ways back at us as users. Right? You go and search Google, and you get hit with a bunch of results that are absolutely bogus. The I don't think anyone really grasps how much of social media is AI bots at this point. It's been replaced. Like every phase of AI growing has been because real users have abandoned the space. Anyways.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on that. There is a real economic issue here beyond, I don't think that the ethical and legal positions stand, as I've said, that's not going to work. But there is a real economic problem here, which is that if you move from this old model of you search for something using a search engine like Google, you click on a link and you go to someone's website, and then, you're viewing some ads that are there in the side and on the top, and that's how that website is able to continue going. That's how they keep the lights on. You learn that piece of information and you move on with your day. The new model, of course, that's emerging is that you ask that question to one of these models, and it either, based on its training data, or it itself goes out and searches the web and extracts the data from your website, just as GPT-4 currently does, provides you with that answer. And in audio form like this, you're not even seeing a source. So there are some models that have a sort of solution here, which is that they show you the source of what they've obtained. And with this is obviously just going to be direct to your audio. The economic problem is there. How does the source of this information continue to go on, right? Because if this is searching the web, that Meta AI has a partnership with Bing, where that's how they do their web results. I think OpenAI's GPT series uses Bing as well. Google obviously uses their own search engine. How do the original websites that came up with this information fund themselves? This is something obviously very personal to us. If you ask a Meta AI or GPT-4 about a question that it searches the web and finds the answer from an UploadVR article, instead of going to the UploadVR article, then we don't get any money from that, right? There's no income to us. And over time, if that becomes the dominant way that people get answers, then a website like us, hypothetically, right? If this was 100% of people doing this, just for the sake of this thought experiment, we would then close, right? Because obviously we'd be making zero money. We can't keep the lights on. And then the next time you ask a question about VR and AR, it searches the web. And in this thought experiment, if you play it out over time, where's the new information coming from, right? It's this thing isn't these models can't put a headset on their head and tell you what they thought of it. These models are not great at distinguishing between press release claims and marketing hype and reality. They can't actually distinguish market analysis. They aren't capable of these things. You do need to still have some economic model that rewards the people that are actually providing the source information in the first place.
And to LL's comment, I think we have to assume that'll be the dominant way. So remember, like I've been at this a while, and I worked for other organizations before this one, and one of them was the Orange County Register, the local newspaper where Oculus set up its first headquarters. That's how I got hooked onto this industry. And I remember this meeting where they sent a Google representative, a sales rep, to come talk to the publication about their offerings. And it's like talking to a brick wall. Google assumes they are part of the fabric of humanity's knowledge base. They assume that they are necessary for the publication, and there's no negotiating from a place of, hey, can you give us a a small cut of the searches that you're getting, it's a non-starter, because if Google has to go and do that for every publisher around the world, suddenly their whole system collapses. Well, they're eating these AI answers as quickly as they can. It's even, I think it's more insidious than we're even describing here. I think there are a lot of puppet uh, bylines all over the internet that have been they've essentially been acquired by companies who are publishing new articles under bylines that used to be real, right? And you have, because what's the motivation for the person to go and discover this? If you do it on the order of tens of thousands of authors across the world, as well as making up your own authors, you're just like, you're taking time out of a person's day to go and reclaim their byline off the internet. Like, that is the process we're talking about here. You're talking about uh, a really ugly process at its very core, and I think we're only beginning to really understand just how ugly some of the underlying layers there are.
Yeah, really interesting discussion here. We have, a comment here from ADR2T suggesting that some of the solutions here are, login systems and paywall for that information. We already have a payment system on UploadVR.com. You become a member or a patron. The reality is that the majority of people are not going to do that. We deeply, deeply appreciate our members and our patrons. You are part of how we keep going, and it's essential to us. But the reality is that the vast majority of our business continues to be advertising supported reading from free users. And there are a huge percentage of people who are not going to pay for these things. And how would they even, right? Like, you could come up with some sort of system that piecemeal pays out what your subscription into websites that you obtain content from. Maybe that could work. But what's definitely not going to happen is that you're not going to subscribe to every single piece of every single outlet that brings you information through your AI model, right? It's not going to be like, oh, I'll give you your answer, give me 50 cents. Like, that's not going to happen. Daniel Leeper bringing up a comment asking, by then, won't the models be the source of new knowledge anyway? I think I covered that before by saying that, firstly, they cannot do things in the real world, right? No AI model can put on a Quest 5 and tell you how sharp the lenses are, or how good the occlusion is, or how good the varifocal adaptation time is, or how the hand tracking works in low light, right? Theoretically, I'm sure in the future at some point you can get these robots that will put them on, but at that point, that's going to cost more than a human for decades and decades and decades to come. The other problem is, even when it's not real world things, they are very, very bad. We use AI today at UploadVR for spell check, literally for spell check. But what I've obviously experimented with is how well would these models work if they were writing a new article about a new topic. And I've done this experimentation. To be clear, we have never published this. I'm just talking about locally on my machine, doing some tests to see the quality. And the problem is that it is completely incapable of distinguishing between the marketing hype that a company puts out and reality. It will tell you all about what Meta or HTC or Apple says their headset's great at. It'll give you, Meta will say that Quest 2 has stunning, high quality, near photorealistic graphics or something. The model will never be able to, or at least for the vast foreseeable future, will not be able to say, hang on, that's bullshit. That part doesn't real. That's a company exaggerating. That's the key of why humans are still going to be in the loop and needed for a very, very long time, because we have the ability to distinguish between what is real from our actual experience with these headsets and games and products versus what a company writes down in their press release and wants you to believe.
Ironically, there is it's similar to the gap that happens between Eastern marketing and Western marketing. So if you go and see a lot of marketing out of China for Western audiences, it has the same vibe of missing an understanding of what's real and what's fake. And it's usually because there's a translation barrier there of truly having an understanding of the topic. But to the point here, right, is it dumbing down the people who are reading these things? It's the people who can't discern between a bullshit answer on one of, a hallucinated answer and one that actually is relevant. That's like, we're still.
It's not even hallucination though, right? It's not that they've made this up. It's that they just lifted it straight from the marketing of one of these companies with no distinguishment between, is this just bullshit or is this real? Like, it's not that it's made it up out of nothing. It's that every company is going to tell you that their product's the best product and that theirs does the best X, Y, Z. What a tech reviewer does is ignores all of that, tries the thing and tells you what the reality is. But I do think we want to move on here at some point, unless you have more to add here. Just noting,
just make that call out to be a member and support our work directly. Go to UploadVR.com, click that support us button to become a monthly member. I know it is a very hard thing to do. I subscribe to the New York Times, and that is, on a short list of places that get my subscription, my money on a monthly basis. And you're looking at a reporter, right? This is someone who needs to have those subscriptions to understand what's going on in the world. I don't subscribe to the Washington Post, but I've always been tempted to. But that money, those subscriptions are the direct way to support journalism online, to support the work we do directly, and keep us going, help us grow, and bring more people into this future where we're giving them solid info that they can actually make plans on, and not AI generated answers.
Yeah, I think I'll just finish off this segment by replying to the developer of Lo-Fi, Anti-Cleric, real name Blair, in the comments, always providing us with the devil's advocate, to put it nicely. It's great that we don't have an echo chamber. I'm thankful that you're here to bring us the alternative view, saying, does anyone care about the upload business model? And of course, as Ian's just pointed out, the reason we're talking about this is as an example, but this is not unique to us. This is the entire information, media, journalism sphere of the internet. Every outlet, if you have any topic of interest, right, be it cars, maybe you're someone who loves to read about the latest cars and hear how they drive on a track, something that AI is not going to be able to tell you. Or if it's even just you like to look up and see what the best health food is, or you want to find out something about exercise from human beings that are doing these things. All of these things are relying on this same business model that we do, right? This is not something unique to us. This is something that I am sure that every single person in the comments has some sphere of their life that they care about reading what an expert who has access to all of the products or services or offerings within that sphere has to say about them. And this is going to be a real significant issue across the entire industry. Now, let's move on to talk about meta avatars. This is something that was teased back in Connect 2022, almost 2 years ago. Mark Zuckerberg said that in 2023, an avatar's graphics overhaul was going to happen. That obviously didn't happen. But what we now have seen is that some Meta employees are finally using these, because VR enthusiast Luna spotted that some of their Horizon profiles, their Quest social profiles, showed these completely new avatar designs. And Luna sent us the URLs so that we could verify this. Both Luna and Upload decided that we didn't want to out these Meta employees. We don't want to get them in trouble. We just want to show these avatars. For comparison, if you're not familiar, we right now are using Meta avatars. The third-party SDK does not offer legs, but in their first-party SDK on Horizon, it does. Let me be clear there, actually. The third-party SDK offers non-animated legs, but animated legs are currently only available in Meta's first-party products like Horizon Home and Horizon Worlds. But if you're not familiar, this is what they look like today. And then, again, for comparison, here is what this graphics overhaul is going to look like.
Big differences there. They're on their fifth, sixth iteration. We forget how many times they've kind of updated us on how these avatars are going to change. It's going to be an upsetting day when we come into the studio and see completely new avatars. David, I'd like some forewarning when we do that. I always wonder, how should we do reveals? Sorry, go ahead. Just
before you speak, I'm very sorry to interrupt you. I just want to very much so clarify. Little Scampy is saying, IMO, I prefer the left avatar, and then followed up with, was that two different people or different avatar models? This is not a before and after. These are both the new avatars. These are both two different people with the new avatars. These are the old avatars. These are both the new ones. Now, sorry, Ian, please continue.
I forgot my line of thinking. There was a comment, let's see, Big saying we're mid-stride with offloading our mental processing, a calculator for thinking. I think that is the risk that we are discussing. To the commenters, pointing out that we're down on AI. Well, no, it's not exactly that. It can be a very useful tool in very useful contexts. David, right? David dropped that spell checker on us unexpectedly one day, and it fixed a whole bunch of typos in our articles very, very quickly. And those articles are, every one of those fixes that we went and made are made by us manually. So like it very quickly improved our work considerably in a way that keeps it from hallucinating in front of our audience to the negativity or to the negative people out there. We're not. I think there's a larger thing happening with AI. Like I see a continuing focus from the previous stuff, like the previous big data. There's a whole trend there, and now it's just being called AI, and it's got a lot of really, really great things. These avatars, David, like, are you going to switch them in this studio one day? Are we going to get these avatars one day unexpectedly?
It depends on whether they bring out the SDK at first. What we've seen is that they first roll these things out in Horizon Worlds and Horizon Home, and then months later, typically make it available to third-party developers. Our intention is actually to switch to the Ready Player Me avatars, which already look quite similar to these. We should note that this does look like it's kind of somewhat copying Ready Player Me's style, but it's just about time, right? My job is to write articles for UploadVR.com and to talk to sources, conduct interviews, try out hardware, go to events, and maintain our website, add a AI spell checking bot. These are things that I would love to have enough time to add things like Ready Player Me avatars and lots of other things to the studio. Unfortunately, as any developer in the comments will know, development is not something that you can just pop in and do 15 minutes for when it comes to a complicated networked application that uses VR. This is something where you have to dedicate hours at a time, often entire days, often entire weeks to this. And unfortunately, that's not something we can do at the moment. But yeah, hope if this is a simple upgrade path and they make the SDK available, of course we will. It'll be interesting to see. One of the things I would love them to do is actually add inside-out body tracking to their avatars. Currently, that is not on the Meta avatars, which is crazy when you think about it, right? It's a flagship feature of Quest 3. It's going to be in Quest 3S. Third-party developers have already added it to their game characters, and Meta's own avatars still don't support it. So you're not actually seeing upper body tracking on us right now because the Meta avatars do not do it. But just to quickly touch on the AI thing, we're definitely not AI doomers at all. There are some very interesting applications of AI. It's a very fascinating topic that I follow closely, and I think there are incredible use cases. And sometimes we just have to, talk about the fact that there are also some downsides and some changing business models. It's not even that there's a downside; it's just that there is going to need to be this new business model to keep this thing thriving.
I'm gonna refer to the review that we had. I think I got to talk about it. So we had a freelance writer write a review for us of a game, and they used ChatGPT to fill out their opinion for them. And we deleted the review and replaced it with a review by another writer who played the game, and noted at the bottom of that article that the review was removed for that reason. And we have a fresh review on our website from a person who played the game and reviewed it. I can't blame that writer for going and doing what they did, right? Like that they saw a way to fill out their opinion and they used it, right? It made it more economical to do that job for us, right? Like they spent less time to get that review written for us. I didn't notice it when I smelled it. I looked at the review and I was like, that's just a little odd, but I didn't stop it from getting published, and that was my mistake. I regret letting that get past me. One of our readers noticed that there were some words used in that review that were indicative of ChatGPT. And then I went and verified that with the author that they had actually used ChatGPT to fill out their opinion. I immediately, the same day, removed the review and got work on replacing it with a new one. Think about that, right? That's a different use case than all the defenders in our comments, right? That's a person using AI to fill out their opinions for them. That's how, that's not, like, do you see the problem with that use? Because it's pretty plain to me that you should not have uh, a third party AI program filling in your thoughts for you. Whereas it's like, in that, at least in that respect, right? But like, that's that was a mistake on our point. We now do a check with our writers to verify that they do not use ChatGPT in their contributions to us. But yeah, I like this, Anthony. AI, tell me what I think. Um, did it fill in or did it reword his thoughts? A lot of people trying to defend now the use. Like, I totally get it, right? The best, yeah, I get the allure, right? As someone who has to figure out how to pull the bullshit out of press releases for a living, I can understand the allure of letting an AI do the first draft for you and then you honing it down. Like, there's plenty of people who are doing that left and right. But this was even more than that. To take an example back to my teenage years, I wrote an editorial for the school newspaper about how the school cafeteria was taking money out of the hands of the student body because they stopped the the soda machine from having money go to the student body, and now that money had to go to the cafeteria. I wrote an editorial about it in high school. A fellow student took my editorial word for word and reprinted it in a local publication. And I really, it was straight up plagiarism, word for word back in that case. And it's really hard to see how what that author did with filling out their opinion is dramatically different than what that high school student did back in the day. And in either case, the high school student that plagiarized my work, 20 years ago now, and the person who was writing for their website, they didn't know it was wrong. That was their claim. They didn't know that they shouldn't be doing this. And that's happening left and right all over the place. And I that's my last thing on this. I thought I needed to own that and really put it out there in front of our audience, our stance on that, because it's like, your opinion should start with yourself, right? They shouldn't start with an external source sort of editing them for you. I don't know. Anyways.
Well, we're going to have to rename this episode AI Download at some point. I think we've talked about AI quite a lot more than I expected to, but that's not to dismiss it. It is an interesting conversation to have. And a trend we're going to see is that the applications of AI to AR and VR are going to be, it's going to be inseparable, right? Already, a lot of the core technologies in these headsets are powered by machine learning models, and you're going to see that just increase over time. These are devices where literally the core functionality, like when Quest 1 first came out, the positional tracking was mostly handcrafted computer vision. And over time, they've replaced more and more of that with machine learning models. You have machine learning powering the tracking of your hands, the inside out body tracking on Quest 3. It's assisting in some of the scene understanding, where when you scan your room in Quest 3, it can kind of label that part's a TV, that part's a wall, that part's a table, all of these things. So there is no hard distinction between AI and AR. VR is the last thing I'd point out with that. And just to move off the avatars topic, I think given the timeline that we're seeing this, it's almost certain that we're going to see this announced or even maybe released, but probably just announced with a solid timeline at MetaConnect, which is happening in late September. But let's move on to talk about Apple Vision Pro in what I hope will be a short segment, because the reason I wanted to talk about these two pieces of news is just to keep up to date with what's happening with Vision Pro, in some ways to combat the idea that, Apple has abandoned this thing, which is completely not true, and just to kind of keep everyone up to date on what's happening. So the first piece of news is that there is a new virtual environment, and this may sound like a silly thing to dedicate an entire article to, but the reason I am doing so is that if you haven't tried Vision Pro, one thing you should understand is that these home environments, these virtual environments, are some of the most photorealistic places in VR. It is staggering the difference between a Quest home environment and a Vision OS home environment. Truly, when you first go into one of these things, I have not seen anyone whose reaction hasn't been, holy shit. Like people who I've demoed all of these headsets to, who I've put in all of these kinds of virtual worlds. When you see this thing, these are high quality 3D photo scanned photogrammetry with really clever rendering and obviously foveated rendering to keep the quality up. It feels great to be in a Vision OS home environment. I've heard estimates that each of these environments cost, when it comes to the total cost of producing them, including the photogrammetry, is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for each of these little home environments. So that shows you the kind of effort that's being put into these. And yeah, this new one is it's a eerie Norwegian lake with a lot of fog in it. So some people have pointed out that this would be a great environment to watch a horror movie in, where you've got your giant cinema screen floating above the lake, and you actually have the reflections from the cinema screen reflecting across the lake. And that's the kind of thing that is just really incredible to see on Vision OS.
Yeah, so there's, what is that movie? Megalopolis from, was it Francis Ford Coppola, I think, is making that movie. And supposedly there's a portion in the story where someone walks out on stage and addresses the theater. I'm noticing this trend in movies where it feels like some of the directors are feeling the wheels fly off the industry, and that they're trying to come up with ways of using that environment around you. And it is, like, I imagine a feature here for an environment that is this eerie and spooky. What if you had an option to turn on random encounters or random scare encounters? And it, the software could choose a moment in the film that you're watching. You're watching this big screen to have a scary little monster crawl out of the river, crawl out of the lake at you. And, or, you hear something rustling in the woods over there to the left. These environments are that realistic that kind of functionality starts popping in your head, and you start wondering, wow, what if we actually use this in real VR fishing? That's the closest I've come. Like, real VR fishing environments are really, really well done for that. And there's some environments where they've got like bears over there on the other side of the water, and various animals out in the distance. I really would like to see like a video player app try something like this, like virtual desktop. Do we have Guy Godin? Has he ever thought about activating a fear feature inside of VR desktop that you would turn on random horror movie encounters? Oh man, that would be so scary. I want to go talk about Unspaghettable's comment. Seems like public perception on the Vision Pro is so negative right now. I'm not sure why. There's obviously the price point is very hard for anyone to empathize with, right? There's people are struggling in many, many, many ways. So looking at a $3,500 computer for the future, so that people can fly on jets across the United States in complete privacy without talking to anybody else, doesn't have a lot of appeal. However, I want to tie back to that AI discussion we just had. How many opinions online are produced by real people these days? I do argue and contend that as places like Twitter have lost real users, they've replaced those real users with fake users, and those people are contributing. Those bots are contributing to public perception and commentary that is warping a lot of the conversation here. And then, of course, the news sources, as we are discussing in this podcast, they're losing people left and right. There's outlets that used to have hundreds of people now have 5 or 10. And those are the people producing news for you about this market and about Vision Pro, right? There's not a lot of sources who are putting in the work like David did, where he has you have like a word for each dollar in that review that it costs to buy a Vision Pro. And you can read thousands of words of careful analysis about what that headset actually does. And you see him in that review boil it down. This is a headset that is out of reach for most everyone, with a software system that depicts the future of all personal computing. And like that doesn't fit into a headline on any other website. That doesn't fit into a tweet that you're going to click on.
Yeah, those are great points. I think there are definitely multiple factors at play here. One is just the price, right? General consumer sentiment is that if something is out of your price range like that and it's new, it's not something you've seen before, you have a strong incentive to have a negative sentiment towards it, right? Because it's such an easy way to dismiss it. Who cares if I can't afford it if it's terrible? So I'll decide in my head that it's terrible. Also, of course, you have what LL is pointing out in the comments, that negative sentiment drives clicks. Saying that something is terrible and awful and mocking it gets a lot more attention on the internet, unfortunately, than a careful, thoughtful analysis of its advantages and its strengths and its long-term potential. And the other real thing here is about that long-term concept. The problem with a lot of modern media, including the tech media, is that it's so short term. Everything is all about, well, if something didn't succeed in 2 months, then it's failed. When it came to this idea of the metaverse, right? Meta rebranding, everyone goes, whatever happened to the metaverse? Like, what are you talking about? This was announced like 2 years ago as being a multi-decade project. The current media landscape simply cannot fathom the concept of something happening on the scale of decades anymore. So many of the tech journalists of today, there are a lot that I respect, and I'm not trying to shit on all of them, but so many of them clearly grew up in this era of smartphones starting to plateau, where every advancement was of all that they were covering were these really mature technologies that already had reached hundreds of millions of people, that were already seeing these massive reductions in price and improvements in quality. But really, these phones were the culmination of decades of handheld personal computing devices. They were not. Personal computing in your hand did not start with the iPhone. The iPhone was the culmination of those decades. And so they just don't have the background and the context. They don't study the history of technology to say, look at the decades that it took from personal computers first arriving on people's desks until they became a mainstream product, until the internet appeared. The idea that, there were people that often would say these personal computers are pointless, they're useless, they're never, maybe they'll be in some bank, or you'll use them for a spreadsheet once a year, but I'm sure normal people would never want them, including, as I pointed out last week, Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, as famously is on the record as saying that personal computers are a bubble that will never be anything more than a niche. So what we are seeing, as Ian points out, is this is the first iteration of Apple's hardware. This is the first Vision headset, the Vision Pro. And what you should really be looking at here is not Vision Pro. Vision Pro is almost irrelevant. What matters is Vision OS. The real product here is Vision OS, because that's the product that people who are in the Apple ecosystem will be using in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whenever the price to value proposition for Vision headsets crosses the point that they will want to use it.
So a lot of interesting comments, and I feel that I feel the hate for the AI discussion and wanting to get back to the to the VR discussion. I get it, but so there's this comment here that I have to address, like, because it's fair, right? The person's saying, should I get how do I get an AI edited version of this podcast that's just about the VR segments? And I appreciate that. I get it, because I think that speaks to the trend that's happening in AI. I would love to use AI to go through my my library of photos and videos that I've collected and made over the last 15 years and say, give me give me a time lapse of my kid from now, or let me see from birth to now. Let me see them age. Those videos that you've seen people produce where they took a photo of their kid every single day for 18 years. Well, AI can help you produce that with your own content library. But critically, the AI tools haven't let us do that with our own content libraries. They've let it happen on the public content libraries. Sorry, David, you got some thoughts there. I wanted to mention that because AI is embedded in all of our VR technologies. Like that's another part I have to address here. Like it's powering all of the improvements that we enjoy on Quest today, right?
Sure, but we covered that. I was just laughing at the point where you said, I hear you commenters that we've talked about AI too much, so let me talk about AI some more instead of VR. Let's try to keep and focus on the VR topics we're talking about for the end, because we really have spent a lot on talking about AI, and we're starting to repeat ourselves at this point. And, we are VR download, we're not AI download. Although we've talked about the relevance, we don't need to keep going back into those. AI topics
We'll
over and
see,
over again.
David. I will not be contained by you and your AI. All right, are we ready to talk about the new hot air balloons Apple immersive video?
Yeah,
Because that
yeah,
is
that's
our
the
last
last.
subject on Apple, and then we've got the last subject here where David went and traveled in the physical world to check out the Somnium VR1 and get some first impressions out there. But what's this first one, David?
Yeah, so we just wanted to cover this because we want to point out that Apple continues to push out these Apple immersive videos. If you don't know what they are, it's just Apple's brand for 180-degree 3D stereoscopic video with 8K resolution, spatial audio, and very high bit rate. And it's actually that high bit rate that makes this magical to me. There have been 8K 3D videos in the past, but so many of these platforms and videos have really just skimped out on bitrate. And so that really matters when this image is being magnified across your face and you see all this blockiness. Apple's magic is that they actually put the bitrate in. And if you're listening to this and you're anyone that is behind either Meta's Meta Quest TV system that streams 180-degree and 360 videos, or you're any company that has anything to do with streaming 180 and 360-degree video, double the bit rate, triple the bit rate, quadruple the bit rate, stop skimping on bit rate, because when you do that, you get really high quality experiences like what Apple is putting out. These are high production short documentaries. This new series is called Boundless. This first episode is about hot air balloons, and as they describe, it takes you on a stunning journey above Turkey's iconic rock formations with the first woman hot air balloon pilot as your guide. And yeah, it's truly these series that they're putting out are almost hardware sellers. I am very reluctant to call things killer apps, but the response I've had from demoing Apple Immersive Video to regular people have been incredible, because you're essentially seeing these photorealistic scenes being guided through these incredible parts of either dinosaurs or wildlife or nature or extreme sports by experienced documentary makers in a immersive 180-degree format. This is the kind of thing that's going to sell headsets to people beyond the gaming market. And unfortunately, we can't show you it because it's DRM to hell. There's no way to download it. There's no way to stream it. If anyone has cracked that, let me know. But I've looked it up and I don't see anyone that's cracked that. Unfortunately, you'll just have to take our word for it that Apple Immersive Video is great. And it's great to see they keep pumping it out. And as we've reported on UploadVR.com, Apple has a plethora of Apple Immersive content coming out over the next 12 months. They are really investing in this, including a short film from the director of It's All Quiet on the Western Front. And I think they have an experience from The Weeknd, from Red Bull. They have a bunch of different producers creating this content. And I think this is a huge part of Vision Pro's value proposition, right? You get a Quest, gaming, social, fitness. You get a Vision Pro, it's, movies and TV shows on a giant cinema screen, spatial computing, optionally with your Mac monitor, and Apple Immersive Video. That is really one of the core use cases of this thing.
Yep, and Apple is supplying creators with hardware to go and start making these in greater numbers in different ways. And we have yet to see kind of the first public push of content that's been produced since Apple Vision Pro has shown people what great content looks like in this. We haven't seen the wave of creators go and get content with a headset in hand and with the new camera in hand, and then trying to tweak the footage that they're capturing out of the camera for the headset. So that's going to happen in real time around us. As I would expect this content to get better, to improve as creators learn sort of the tricks of the trade. But we've seen this content. People talking about bitrate, right? We've seen low bitrate wraparound content for years. We saw Gear VR and Samsung trying to stream that through over to your headset. And what we're seeing with Apple is incredible control from the sensor capturing the image all the way to the display showing you a foveated view of what you're seeing. They control that entire pipeline from end to end in a way that Samsung and Meta are going to have to catch up to. And I'm seeing a lot of our commenters, that goes down to licensing and the licensing agreements for various formats, as well as for the the codecs and how these things are minimized and streamed over the internet. You have a format war that goes down to the very browsers that we use to search the internet, with different camps sort of defending certain technologies because they're more available while other technologies are more open. And it's this tension that's going. And all the problem, the thing that these other companies are going to have to fight back again is, how do you get this much bit rate out of competing platforms?
Yeah, I think Apple's real advantage here is that they run a streaming platform, right? These videos, these Apple Immersive videos, are all served through Apple TV Plus. And it may sound simple on the face of it, of how to run a streaming service. You just host some files and stream them. But when you actually look into how this is done and how difficult this is to do at a global scale, it's really hard and requires years of infrastructure build out. And that's why Netflix is considered one of the great tech companies, right? Why so many engineers want to work there, why those engineers at Netflix get paid like $500,000 a year, some of them, because this technology is actually very, very difficult to do right. And if you don't have a streaming service, you haven't already built out if you're not already solving this problem of how do you stream content at the highest possible quality to as many people as possible, then you're going to be at a huge disadvantage there. And obviously this is something Meta does too, right? Because it has, Instagram Reels and Facebook Watch. But I do think when it comes to the enormous file sizes of these Apple Immersive videos, just like movies on Apple TV Plus, you do get a little bit of an advantage there that isn't there before. Just to address some comments here, Mr. Mycelium saying, I can't wait until more of these stereoscopic 180-degree cameras get in people's hands. That's one of the things Apple also announced at WWDC that we covered, that they are partnering with that company, with the Australian camera company that has gone out of my mind here. They make a very popular camera to build a camera specifically for Apple.
Blackmagic?
That they're seeding. Sorry?
Blackmagic?
Yes, Blackmagic, that they are working, Apple has partnered with Blackmagic to build this camera that creators can use. Now, this is something that's going to cost in the order of $10,000 to $20,000. So this is for studios, but it at least means that right now, everything so far has been from Apple through their acquisition of Next VR, those cameras that they've built, all of these Apple Immersive videos. But we are now seeing creators get the capability to do this. DaVinci Resolve, the video editing software, is going to get support for editing the content of this and publishing it. So you're seeing an entire pipeline being built around this. And Daniel Leeper says in the comments, no matter how good that video is, I ain't paying $3,500 to see it. And you're absolutely right. But this is all building up a content library for Vision OS, the real product, because it's not going to be $3,500 in 2 years. And then it's not going to, maybe even in 1 year, right? If the rumors of the cheaper Apple Vision headset coming out at the end of next year are right, you could see a maybe $2,000 headset. And then 2 or 3 years down the line, maybe you'll see a $1,500 headset. And then, a few years after that, maybe you're going to see a $999 Apple Vision headset that really starts to get massive viewers. And by that time, you'll have all of this content on Apple TV Plus. You'll have all of these creators making this content, not just for Apple Vision, I'm sure. They can also use that to publish it on Quest and on Google's platform. And this is going to be a meaningful content type when it's done right. And it's hard to do it right, but when you do it right, it is compelling.
A meaningful content type when it's done right. I love that. That is a very, very good way of summing this up. There's the comments from Wabo, and the ongoing discussion here of why there is negative sentiment towards Apple Vision Pro, and suggesting that I just hand waved it. Wabo saying my point was that there are real concrete reasons, and they're talking amongst themselves about what those reasons are. There was another comment earlier on that I'm going to use as the basis of this last section before we move on to Somnium. The comment was that Meta is on steps 5 or 6 of their VR journey, where Apple is on step 1 of their journey. And I appreciated that comment because it puts a couple things in perspective. Apple learned from steps 1 to 4 of Meta's journey. They went to school on what Meta did in steps 1 to 4, and that's what we're seeing out of Apple Vision Pro. Now Meta is going to school on Apple's first entry into the market, and you're seeing Quest improved by leaps and bounds. And And then there's this sentiment thing, this problem, and I didn't hand wave it, right? It's $3,500 is deeply off-putting for the vast majority of people. I get into a car, I've gotten into multiple Ubers. Like I got into Ubers at the Apple event with the driver asking me what am I doing, and I'm like, yeah, I'm here for a conference, and Apple just announced its headset, and it's $3,500, but you can go get the Meta one, that's only $500. So it's, this $3,500 one isn't going to matter to you for a long time. And that's still true. It's true across the board. There's no like there's what's going to happen this year, what we talked about at the beginning of this show, that Quest 3S, right? They sold tens of millions of the Quest 2, which was underpowered and could not robustly multitask with apps, flat screen apps that you install. Well, you've got a bunch of overhead inside the chip that Samsung is going to use to allow you to multitask with Google apps as soon as the Android XR version of the ecosystem is out there. You're going to see that extra overhead used for better avatars in certain respects. You're gonna see codec like avatars or persona type avatars on lower cost hardware. You're going to get the benefits of everything you're talking about. The things that you're seeing in this Apple headset, you're going to get cheaper and sooner on a competing device because Apple showed the way to those competing devices, and Apple learned from those competing devices. Like it's these companies aren't doing any of this in a vacuum.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only do they learn from each other, but their talent cross pollinates, right? The people who work on Vision Pro, some of them now work on Meta's Quest 4 and Quest Pro 2, and some of the people who worked for Meta now go and work at Apple. This is a classic Silicon Valley phenomenon. There are some specific parts of Silicon Valley where the average tenure is like 6 months. These people hop between all the different companies. We were just talking about streaming services, right? The classic story is somebody goes and builds a feature for Netflix and then hops over to Amazon Prime and builds it for them, and then hops over to Disney Plus and builds it for them. The same thing is happening with dating apps and certain web technologies and cloud, and definitely in AI, right? Right now in AI, a bunch of the people are hopping from company to company. It's just how it is in Silicon Valley. It's one of the kind of foundational engines of innovation there, and it's no different in AR and VR. There's this, people in their mind have this very like categorical distinction of Meta and Apple, and these are like unchanging monoliths in one direction, and the reality is that they are much more intertwined and connected than people want to admit.
Yeah, and I think that does speak to some of the larger things we're thinking about, some of the topics we barely touch on. What is in the interests of Google, Apple, Meta to align on? What things is it actually in their best interest to have some sort of interconnectivity, some way of talking to each other? And we're going to see those things ironed out. Like I just saw someone report that Meta is officially working on a calling service for the codec avatars, something that's pretty obvious and clear from a long way out. But there is a route here where the avatars that we use look like our actual selves and use less bandwidth over the network than a video call. And if that barrier is crossed, you're going to see these technologies proliferate into places you did not imagine. And I think I got to also just before we finish off, I have a lot of Apple devices. I've owned a large number of Android devices over the years, and I built my first PC, my first Windows PC, to have a Windows system, have VR in my home. And what do we see 7 years later? Windows has ripped out the Windows mixed reality function from their operating system in lieu of another path, which I'm not going to mention here because we've talked about it too much. But there are positives to all of these computing platforms, and the one that is nearest and dearest to my heart over the last few months has been Steam. Steam has become very clear in its effort to be an open computing platform that serves you all your content across all of your devices. David, I talked to you about this idea that we could be facing in the near future where what if it makes more sense for Apple to go and get that video file from the neighbor rather than going and getting it from the server out far away. Well, Steam does that today with game files that you
Yeah.
have stored on a different game inside your own network. It's magic.
Disrupt.
Steam is magic, and they are going to do magical things, and they work in really interesting ways with everyone else in this market. Like this isn't we don't have we have a lot of personal devices we use in and out, but we are big believers that all of those current ways of doing computing are going to subside. Like they're going to go down and be left in the dust as these screens start virtualizing all the things the original devices do. And like to me as a lay viewer, to me as just a regular viewer, if I step out of my expertise here or my like role as a journalist trying to be objective, right? If I tried to place a bet on who's going to win, is it going to be Meta or is it going to be Apple or is it going to be Samsung and Google? I could not place that bet right now. I have no idea who's going to win, but right now it's looking really good for Meta, right? Like they are at the cusp of releasing a $300 or so device with a higher end device it gives you just a little bit big picture. And then next year and the years after, they're going to layer in these things that we're seeing on Apple Vision Pro at the qualities that we actually expect. And it's going to be like this speeding up effect, right? It's going to make all this stuff happen faster than anyone expected.
Yeah, I think what I can predict is that there's going to be fierce competition, as I've said before. I think a lot of people are underestimating Google and what they were going to bring to the table here. I think we're going to see a very intense three-way fight between Apple Vision, Android XR, and Meta Horizon as these three platforms try to define the future of computing through virtual and mixed reality. And it's going to be fascinating to keep watching this along. And on a more general point, I think one of the things that's really, really important for me is to make sure that I'm never locking myself into one of these companies' ecosystems, because from an objectivity perspective, that's deeply problematic, right? So I use an Android phone, a Windows PC, an Apple iPad, and I'm sure I use devices from some other ecosystems too. I don't want to get locked into anything. I like seeing what each of these companies is doing so that I am able to not have this thing in my head of, oh, I don't like this because it doesn't integrate into my preferred ecosystem. That's a situation I never want to be in.
Yeah, and it's been fantastic to do so. I spent a fair amount of time. So when Apple Vision Pro debuted, I spent a lot of time messing around with the OS and seeing how far it could take it. And then I put on Quest again, and I started messing around with it the way I was messing with Apple Vision Pro, and things I could not do 8 months ago on that headset now run really smoothly. And that multitasking I'm discussing, right? Steam Link, Apple Music. I've got a video on our site, and on our site of the exact same apps running on both headsets, Meta Quest 3 and Apple Vision Pro. And if you're an average viewer who doesn't know what you're looking at, you would not know that one OS is from Apple and one OS is from Meta, and they're both doing the same fundamental things that we absolutely need to have in these headsets for them to be useful long term. Yeah, Guy Godin saying, I agree with David. I develop on Windows for Android and use iOS for general web browsing and media consumption. It's good to have a foot in each. And I'm absolutely that person. I've got a setup right behind me right now where an analog pocket feeds in over a Shadowcast into a Steam Deck. And then that Steam Deck feeds into an Apple Vision Pro. And what that means is it's not the only thing hooked up to my Steam Deck. I also have other classic gaming systems hooked up to that Steam Deck. What that means is with this stupid, ridiculous setup I've got right now, I can use Steam Link to give me my entire Steam library and anything else that's connected to that Steam in either headset. I can have on Vision Pro all of my Steam content, except, I got to use Steam VR in a special route. And then over on MetaQuest 3, I have all of my Steam content. And I can cast either of those things. Like I can use AirPlay to cast my Steam to whatever device I want using this stupid setup, or I can use Steam Link, and it's all working together in this ridiculous, stupid way, while still proving out that there's benefits to having a library of content inside of Steam. There's benefits to having a library of content inside of Android, and it's like what I'm noticing with Vision Pro's improvements and MetaQuest improvements is I am getting more access to more of my content in more ways almost with every single passing week, and it's phenomenal. It is the biggest evidence I have that VR is going to take over the world. The things that we've been suggesting to you for years now are coming to pass, and we're seeing it in these software updates that are unlocking huge stores of content for us in all sorts of unexpected ways.
Yep, very much so. Now let's move on to our last topic, Somnium VR1. I think we're just past 2 hours now, if I'm correct. Um, so this is a PC VR headset that I went to try out recently. You can read my full impressions on UploadVR.com, but I'll quickly sum them up for you here on the show, as I always try to do. So when I first put this on, what I was really impressed by is the horizontal field of view. If you are someone who uses simulators or whether that be flight simulators or racing simulators, you'll know how important for those specific applications the horizontal field of view is. And it's great to finally see a headset start to push this forward. Yes, we've seen minor improvements from Quest 2 to Quest 3, but even with Quest 3, it got to roughly around like what Valve Index was, right? This actually pushes beyond that for the first time in quite a while without introducing massive distortion. There is a little bit of geometric distortion around the very edge of the periphery, but it's not enough to significantly matter. If you're someone who absolutely will tolerate none, sure, but it's not like you're still getting more undistorted field of view than anything else. It's just that this goes out to like 130, 140 horizontally, whereas what you're used to would be like 110, 105 or so on the best headsets today. So we have a few people in the comments immediately pointing out that this thing is obviously very large. It's, not using pancake lenses. It's not using Fresnel lenses either. It's using aspheric lenses. And those aspheric lenses are a very interesting middle ground because they actually do let you get to roughly the same area of clarity, sweet spot of pancake lenses, but they do have some very difficult to deal with trade-offs. Mostly they had this uncorrectable geometric distortion. And I've heard from some people who were trying out Somnium VR1 back in December that it was a real problem. And so in the 6 months since then, they've put in a lot of effort into engineering the optics to improve this. And so the optical distortion profile. Paul Tuff pointing out this is not standalone or any form of onboard processing. That's correct. This is a PC VR headset unashamedly. This is for plugging in to your PC's graphics card's DisplayPort and playing PC VR games. This is not at all a standalone headset. And that's the market here, right? So this thing is expensive. This requires base stations, just like a big screen beyond does, which for 2 of those base stations, you're talking $300. The base price of this is $1,900, and that doesn't include some of the key features. Eye tracking. If you want the eye tracking version for foveated rendering, that's $2,500. But one of the things that really blew me away about this headset, well, let me actually, before I go to this, get back to what I was going to say. I got a little bit off track, which is the problem I had with this headset. The problem I had is a very strange issue that I haven't had with a headset in a very long time. And it seems to be an issue with using these dual element aspheric lenses, which is that I had this strange inability to focus. This is actually very hard to describe, which is ironic given that my job is to write and describe things. But essentially, there were some areas of the lens where when I looked at them, it was as if I was unable to focus the image, so it was blurry, and then my eyes would start to converge together incorrectly to give this kind of cross-eyed effect. And this was very strange. So obviously the first headset I tried this in, I assumed this was just a defect. I stood up, I walked to the other demo station and tried the other demo headset, and unfortunately found the exact same thing. So this was not the IPD being wrong. I made sure that my IPD was set correctly. I tried adjusting the headset up and down as many ways as possible. I'm quite experienced in dialing into headsets. What I was able to do with the Finder was to go into the Somnium VR1 PC software and tweak the distortion profile to get it to not have this as much. But the problem is that there's like 4 to 5 to 6 different lens parameters that you can tweak. And this thing is, again, it's unashamedly unashamedly a PC headset. This is for PC enthusiasts who absolutely love configuration tools that take 6 parameters to dial it into your exact preferences. If you're that kind of person, this is the kind of headset that you're going to love, because it does let you do that, but it's not the kind of headset you put on, at least for me, out of the box and everything just works. There's going to be a lot of tweaking done here. Now, unfortunately, at this event, despite it being all day, I actually got very little time with the headset itself, and you can read more about that in my article. But I could imagine that if I was given this thing at my home and I had 2 or 3 or 4 hours, I could find the perfect lens parameters that would make this either a minimal issue or not an issue at all. I could imagine that. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time to check that out. So it essentially, you'd think it's a binocular overlap issue, except that this headset has something like 80 to 90 to 100% binocular overlap. So it shouldn't be like a low binocular overlap issue, and it shouldn't be the kind of thing that happens with high binocular overlap. I think it's just something intrinsic in the lens that's a little bit more complicated than that. Some of the people in the comments are pointing out that this thing is big and bulky and heavy. That's somewhat correct, but one of the really nice parts of this is that it actually has a hinge in the middle of the side of the straps that allows you to position the back padding, which is quite hefty and substantial. It's like a standalone headset that has a battery in it on the back, but doesn't actually have a battery, obviously. It allows you to position this at the perfect point of the back of your head to set up that counterbalance to be where it will naturally cup the curvature of the back of your head, because everyone's is slightly different. You may have used some headsets that don't let you do this, that have very little adjustment, like Quest Pro, where you can't rotate the front box and you have this kind of very rigid strap. And you may find that when you try to use the back padding of Quest Pro to make your head comfortable, it's never quite in the right place. That's something that this adjustable hinge in the middle of the strap really, really helps with. So I actually didn't find this deeply uncomfortable. I wouldn't call it like a super duper comfortable headset, but what I have to be very clear about is that I did not have enough time to verify that. We make very clear on UploadVR.com the difference between a hands-on impressions piece and a review. A hands-on impressions piece where I had 20 minutes or so in the headset will never tell you how comfortable it is for 2 or 3 hours. I can't do that. And some people in the comments, LL, are pointing out that it was egregious on their part, in LL's opinion, to fly me out to try this thing for a very short time. I thought that was bizarre too, right? That was really strange. You go to this conference, you think the point of coming over here is to try this hardware. And how it really worked was that the day was booked with back-to-back talks from companies, some of which were really interesting. We had Stan LaRue of Lynx. We had some of the people from Leap Motion. But during those talks, these demo stations were closed. And I don't mean like soft closed. They were like, no, the demos are closed. You must listen to the talk.
No.
So
I know, David. I know, David, and I know the way you would attend. You would have preferred to attend those talks is while in headset. Go ahead and talk to me while I'm in headset. Would have been your preferred way to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was everyone at this conference pointed out how strange this was. That it was also the same time booked for lunch, right? So I had this all day event that was from like the morning to the night, where you had these 2 1-hour slots that were the same time that we were fed food and were also the demo slots, and all of the rest of the time were talks. That was just a very strange way to do this. And Arthur, if you're listening to this and you're the founder, next time, a lot more demo time, a lot less talk would make this a lot better of an event. But I must point out, I did actually enjoy some of the talks. I learned some very interesting things. There were some people behind, there was Hypervision, for example, the people that are working on high field of view pancake lenses. There was some of the people at Leap Motion that were discussing the same technology you were trying at AWE and going into the background of that. There was Stan LaRue of Lynx talking about Lynx's future and current, but it would be great to have both.
Yeah, very balanced sort of view there, and I appreciate the commenters sort of reinforcing what David already put in his hands-on report about it being a disappointing thing that it was a limited amount of time in this headset. And I, having had VR demos for this many years, right? The Razer demo that I ripped apart on a previous episode, the OSVR demo that I got at some conference, right? That was a similar length of time demo, right? And if you give a person that length of a demo in a VR headset, it's a little bit of a red flag that there might be issues going on here that will only surface after the 20 minutes. Apple's initial headset demo was of that similar length, very, very short. You go to location-based VR experiences. I remember trying an Alien Gear VR-based experience. They had built a game around the Alien franchise, and they had built it into a Gear VR, I believe, and then attached positional tracking to that system to let you walk around and see the simplest model of a xenomorph you could possibly imagine drop down in front of you onto this space. And it's just, that's a short demo, right? They try to get you through it in 20 minutes. Sandbox VR, right? You went into Sandbox. We all went with Kyle. We met with Kyle at his home in Ohio, I think, was we were going across the country. And we went to a Sandbox VR location. And again, Sandbox VR is about that length of time. And David comes out of that and he's like, why are they running at half frame rate? Why is the frame rate of everything in here absolute dog shit? And these are locations that are feeding people through by the hundreds on like a weekly or daily basis. And, you come out of that going, whoa, I feel really wonky after that. That was intense. Not really, like you're mixing up the feeling of VR with the feeling of extreme discomfort.
Yeah.
And yeah.
No, 100%. There are so many of these location-based places that give VR just such a bad name, and it's really disappointing to see. So I'll finish off my Somnium VR1 impressions here. We've talked about the field of view. We've talked about that strange focus issue that's causing that kind of strange eye strain. We've talked a little bit about the comfort. The one thing I would point out about that focus issue is that VR enthusiast Brad Lynch, sadly it's Bradley on YouTube, also encountered the same thing, as did some other people that were at that conference. So that wasn't unique to me. But let's talk about some of the positives here. Not only the field of view, the actual quality of the panel. So this is using a kind of 3K LCD that has quantum dots and mini LED backlighting. So the same kind of thing you get in Quest Pro, except a lot higher resolution and also a lot higher brightness. So some of the things that really impressed me here were, for a non-OLED panel, the colors and the contrast here were great. And the brightness you get, because this is an aspheric lens rather than pancake, and because they have the power of a socket being able to drive these things really bright, was really remarkable, right? The brightness I saw on this thing was so refreshing after being down to the kind of 100 nits of Quest 3 and Apple Vision Pro. And LL in the comment is asking, local dimming too? The answer is yes. They have local dimming, so you get this really great contrast. So yeah, you do get this good image quality, assuming your eyes are able to solve for the focus issue, and you can get that solved with all the parameters. You're going to get a great visual experience here. The other thing that blew me away, and probably the most impressive part of the entire demo, was the pass-through. This headset has the best pass-through of any headset I've ever tried. And I really was not expecting that. And one of the reasons they do it is I think they just use a really large sensor that can get in a lot of light. People focus so much on megapixels. It's not really what matters here. This is a high resolution. It's like 12 megapixel per eye, which is like double Vision Pro, but that's not what really matters here. What really matters here is the sensor size and the fact that they're doing some PC side image enhancement algorithms like sharpening and contrast adjustment and tone mapping, things that they're doing on the PC side that deliver a really, really high quality pass-through experience. And one of the cool things this lets you do, and this is probably, again, the most impressive part of my demo, is that you can, in their software, mask out a specific area of your surroundings in pass-through and then have the rest virtual. Using the controller and setup. I wasn't able to use the setup tool myself, but I saw a screenshot of it. So here's what you can do in practice. You can set up your driving cockpit to be passed through and everything else to be virtual. So you're seeing your real hands and your real arms and your real steering wheel and your real pedals and your real shifter and gear stick, but then everything else around you is virtual. And I tried this in a flight cockpit and it was great. It was so good. One of the clumsiest parts of using PC VR for racing simulators and flight simulators is this disconnect between the virtual cockpit you're seeing and the physical cockpit that you built yourself. And obviously there are slight problems there, in that maybe in reality you have a yoke and in the plane you're flying you have a stick. But if you do have like a matched up roughly physical input compared to the simulator input, this is something that I think is just a killer feature. And if you're the kind of person that has spent thousands of dollars on a PC and input hardware to build the ultimate racing sim setup or the ultimate flight sim setup, this is really great. And Paul Tuff's asked me in the comments, Vario, I will be publishing my Vario XR4 impressions fairly soon on UploadVR.com, probably sometime in the next week. But I can tell you already, here's a spoiler on VR download. This thing has better pass-through than Vario XR4. I saw it with my own eyes. I am certain of it. I saw it with my own eyes. So yeah, to be clear, to do what I've just described, you're going to have to spend $2,500 at least to get the model with the pass-through cameras. And to get the full quality pass-through, you're going to want to use the foveated transport that relies on eye tracking. So you would need the $3,500 model of this, plus your $600 of base stations, plus, of course, your PC and sim setup. So this is not a mainstream headset. This is very much so for ultra enthusiasts, for flight simulators and driving simulators. Now, the solution to the problem of how would I know if this is going to work with my eyes, how will I know if I'm going to get this focus issue, is that Somnium says it plans to do these meetups around Europe and around the US, kind of similar to what Pimax did, where you'll be able to show up and try it out. So if you do want to try this headset, if you are the person I just described, the person that spent thousands of dollars on building your ideal sim racing or flight sim setup, I would recommend you go to one of these in-person Somnium meetups, put this thing on your head and see how these lenses work for your own eyes. And I'll just finish by answering Arya's question. Good pass-through, but is there any app you can use it with? Any app. This is a system-level feature. You go into their tool, you mask out the area that you want, like the physical geometry shape that you want pass-through, and you see VR everywhere else.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people really in love with that feature, knowing that it is a must-have for sim fans, and it's something that I want to see on basically all other platforms. So I fully expect this to be copied and used elsewhere eventually, when you can have stations around your house that are pre-specified or even, centered or tethered to certain apps. Like, I would love to have Elite Dangerous and all my flight games sitting there right above the flight stick and seat, right? You can imagine going and sitting down, and as soon as you sit down, up pops 3 apps right in front of you. Those are the 3 apps that are synced up to this cockpit arrangement, and you tap that one, and boom, you're flying in Flight Simulator using your real geometry, your real physical, amazing cockpit, and then seeing VR everywhere else. The other systems are very close to that. The thing I want to talk about, the disparity thing, or the issue that you were having with focusing. I've had that too from time to time. The binocular, like the focusing issue. The one thing I've always wondered about headsets, where you've got dramatically different, like, binocular overlap from headset to headset. You've got dramatically different field of view from headset to headset. What amount of training do your eyes do to the headset you use most often? How attuned do your eyes get to the optical path that you use on the headset you use most frequently? And then when you take that headset off and put on another headset, what happens to your eyes then?
There's certainly a little bit of that, but I do always note in my head, as a stored long-term, unforgettable memory, my first visual experience with each of these headsets. And so, when I tried when I tried the second generation Pancake lenses for the first time in Quest Pro, as opposed to the first gen you saw in like HTC Vive Flow, those tiny little circles. When I tried the proper, dual element Pancakes in Quest Pro, there was no adjustment, right? It was instantly, wow, this is so clear. This is so great. This is great. Just like we all love in Quest 3 now, the slightly enhanced version of that. This is, if that were the case with every headset, this would be a convincing argument, but I just don't think that's going to be the case. Or I think the solution is just tweaking this. I think this is just a problem with aspheric lenses. I've never had this with Fresnel lenses. I've never had this with Pancake lenses. There are just some quirks in aspheric lenses that make them. There's a reason that none of the major companies use aspheric lenses, and it's not because they're too stupid and the small companies are smart, right? The last time that big companies used aspheric lenses was PlayStation VR1, and I think Sony did a lot of work there, and a lot of the cost of that headset was in those lenses. And probably the best aspheric lenses we've ever seen were in Sony's PlayStation VR1. The last time we saw from Meta was Gear VR, right? The Gear VR used aspheric lenses, and I mean they were great in some ways, but limited in others. And Valve never used them, right? Out of the gate, HTC Vive Fresnel lenses, Valve Index Fresnel lenses.
So the comment here from Onakazi, I mean, it's part of Immersed. You can place cutouts and you could do it in workrooms for the keyboard. They should definitely make it part of the system level, though. I think that's absolutely right. We've seen experiments at this, but it absolutely needs to be. Like, ironically, the room setup should be automatic, right? But then you can still use your controllers to think to mark out the areas you want. I would love for that to be the only reason to go back to that old mode of marking out with my controllers in hand. I would love to have it come back right after the room is automatically set up by the headset.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, the way that this would be delivered is through something like Virtual Desktop or Steam Link, right? I don't know if Gigodin's still in our comments, but I know that you have like a chroma keying feature for pass-through. I wonder what your thoughts are on letting the user define a specific geometry for cutout of pass-through. That's kind of, this is a software feature, that part. But it was the quality of pass-through that really did blow me away on this thing. And there was a comment earlier from Onakazi asking, was the lighting good? No, it wasn't. That's why I was so impressed. The lighting, it was really quite dim, actually. And when I took out my phone to like record some video, my phone was grainy and this pass-through wasn't. I really cannot tell you how impressive this was. Guy Godin is saying there's an add-on in Steam VR to do this. That I've heard of that, and that's something that's very useful. It'd be great to see that built into Virtual Desktop, but of course, for now, you can do this with Steam VR. Ideally, what you want eventually is that you can do like per object segmentation someday down the line, where you get this computer vision on the headset can recognize the shape of an object, just like when you're doing like an object removal in Photoshop or on your phone, and you select that object and then it stays and pass through. That's the kind of thing we'll have to see over time.
I think that's it for our show today. I want to encourage people to come back to VR Gamescast on Tuesday, where we will talk about all the ways people play in VR. One of the things I will discuss on that show is Walkabout Mini Golf, which has that recent tour video. I apologize for the amount of AI discussion in this conversation. However, I'm going to figure out a way to push it into this conversation one more time. That video that is on our channel goes to the way I captured it in VR, and then I put it into Descript, where I tweaked it a little bit. I edited out a few pieces, and then I exported it from Descript into the format you see on our YouTube channel. One of the biggest investors in Descript is OpenAI. So I just thought I'd leave that little bit of information out there that our content already flows through OpenAI servers, or flows into their capture area where they are using it for their training left and right. Guy Godin, thank you for tuning in. He's mentioning the name of that software. That's Reality Mixer. And are there any final comments you want to talk about before we shove off until Tuesday?
No, but I think if any of our commenters are playing the drinking game, we'll just get them drunk now by saying Meta, Ray-Bans, AI, Walkabout Mini Golf.
I'm ready to mark out my sim space with my Joy-Cons. I'll see you next week.
Oh, I forgot Joy-Cons, of course. The commenters love that. Yes, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for engaging in the comments. I definitely feel slightly sicker than when I started the show, but I'm glad that I stuck in for the end. I can feel my throat going already, but thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. And yeah, we can't wait to see you again next week. And if there was a comment you forgot to give us, put it down in the comments below. If you're watching this or listening to this after the fact, please put the comments below. We really do listen to them all, read them all. Sorry, my brain's going at this point. Even if we don't get time to reply to them all, we do read them all. And we love your feedback, good or bad, and all of your thoughts on the topics that we've discussed. We'd love to hear as many possible viewpoints and hear what you all think about all of these incredibly interesting things we've been talking about today.
Yeah, thank you so much. We'll see you in the future.
Thanks so much, everyone.